Okay, hold on one second.
We have to adjust to the post-Devon era.
All right.
That's right, Bernard. But we will get through.
We will.
I don't know. They all have.
Oh, let me. Oh, shit.
Just let me know when you folks are ready to go, and I'll start the recording and count us in.
Okay, give me about a minute or two.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll go live in 3, 2, 1.
Good evening. This is the Select Board meeting for February 27, 2024. I'm Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board. I'm wearing a mask today because I have a coronavirus, not COVID, but the common cold. And although it's not COVID, common colds are really a pain in the you-know-what. So I don't want to spread any of my germs around. And although I'm at the late stages of it, I don't know that I am not contagious. So just to the excess of safety, I'm wearing this mask. I am aware that muffles my voice a little bit, so I will try to talk directly into the microphone. If I'm not successful and people can't hear, please let me know. So let's start off the meeting with announcements or updates from the Select Board. Paul.
Thank you, Bernard, and thank you for your thoughtfulness in wearing a mask. I know my family appreciates it. Two quick things. First, there was a hearing this evening at 5 p.m. relating to a beautiful old tree next to the MBTA tracks across from 1902 Beacon Street. This is a tree that is very old. I think it's 37.5 inches around the circumference of the trunk. But unfortunately, it is very, very close to the tracks. I visited the tree just before coming to this meeting, and it's about my shoe length away from the actual rail. And it's beginning to impede the functioning of the T. There was an appeal filed at the hearing by Jocelyn Murphy, town meeting member of precinct 16. And she was very concerned about the loss of the tree. after the meeting, during the meeting, our tree warden, Tom Brady, talked through the mitigation for that tree, which includes the MBTA could either pay us for the tree by our bylaw, $500 per inch, or they can replace the tree essentially half the diameter. So we will get 6 trees as a replacement for the large tree. The tree will come down so we don't impede the T. And I think, it's a reasonable trade. But it's unfortunate to see a beautiful old tree get lost like that, because I do know they take a long time to grow. And the second thing I wanted to bring up is something that came up at our budget meeting last week in the presentation, which was excellent. And I heard from quite a few people about the long-range financial plan. And the long-range financial plan is showing that we're heading into some very difficult times financially, showing a growing deficit potentially starting next year financially on both the school side and for the town. And it reminds me of a discussion that we had as a board over the summer about convening a study committee, not necessarily an override study committee, but really a long-range committee to look at the forecast for the town, revenue, expenses, and come up with some strategies and approaches that we can get input from the public on, and be able to put a plan forward to be able to deal with these upcoming deficits. So I'm hoping that that's something that we can take up as a board in the coming weeks, and see if we can start to put together a strategy to deal with this deficit on the long term. Thank you.
Any other comments or updates? John.
Thank you very much, Paul. And thank you, Bernard. I just want to recognize a couple of people from Brookline who, appropriately enough, because we're nearing the end of Black History Month, is someone
Recording
who
in
was featured
progress.
in the Boston Globe earlier this week. A well-known, as the Globe describes him, prominent jurist. He was a judge, and he also has quite a history as a community activist in Boston. He founded something called Roxbury Youth Works. Julian Houston is a resident of Brookline, and one of the people that sort of, I think, has not only distinguished himself in many fields in Boston over the years, but the particular reason for the Globe recognition is that his name is one of the names recognized as a Boston hero on the Freedom Plaza, where the Embrace sculpture is. So lots of reasons to be grateful for Julian Houston and his contributions to all of us in Greater Boston over the years, and to be grateful to have him as a neighbor in Brookline. The other person is Colette Phillips, who has her own communications firm, quite a notable one, Colette Phillips Communications, also a resident of Brookline. And as it happens, the author of a essay that's in the Boston Magazine currently. And there's kind of an interesting twist to what Colette has written. She's combined her own personal story with elements of her success as a head of a communications company, and also as a success as a person who connects leadership in Boston to diverse communities. She's done great work over the years, and she has a little bit of a surprising message, in this piece she's written for Boston Magazine. So congratulations to Colette Phillips for being recognized by her essay in Boston Magazine, and congratulations to Judge Julian Houston for being recognized by the Boston Globe.
Thank you, John. Appreciate you bringing those up. It will induce me to read the Sunday Globe. It's sitting on my table.
You never know what you're going to miss if
Right.
you miss the Sunday Globe.
Okay. Anything else? Mike, you have anything? No? Okay, good. Regarding a committee to look at our long-range financial situation, We've had a number of committees. I think maybe one way to start this is to look at what we've already determined to be the issues facing us in terms of the structural deficit that Proposition 2.5 has imposed on us and expects us to work around. BFAC, for example, had a number of recommendations with respect to our long-term structural deficit, and other committees and individuals have looked at this. And maybe we should find or look to see what has already been proposed and what plans are underway, and see if they need to be updated, improved, or what have you. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have such a committee. I'm just saying that we've done a lot of this work already. We know what the problem is, and it's no mystery. We have to increase our revenues, cut our expenses, or do other things that are difficult, but sometimes necessary to sort of balance our budget each year. So, yeah.
Yep. So just briefly, Bernard, I didn't want to get into a debate about this tonight. I do think that it's something that we should just add to an agenda to just have this discussion and figure out what's the best approach for this board to help, provide the leadership and the assistance that the town administrator needs and others to make sure that we can address this challenge.
Good.
That's what I'm
Good.
suggesting.
Thank you. Any other comments from the select board? Seeing none. Public comment. We don't have Devin to introduce the public comment section or segment of our meeting. Charlie?
I can do that, Bernard. I was just
Okay,
about to
and
jump in.
please let people know when they're 30 seconds or when they have 30 seconds left. Try to be as nice and personable as Devin was, as I know you are.
I will do my best, Bernard, but no promises. Thank you for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues that matter to you. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Once a total of 15 minutes has been met, there is an opportunity at the end of the select board's business for additional comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. We'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. Please conclude your remarks at that time. And if you have more to say, you are always welcome to send an email to the board expressing your thoughts in greater detail. I believe at this time we have one person signed up for public comment. And that was Arthur Conquest. Is Arthur in person?
Yes.
Arthur, you may approach the presentation station.
Good evening, Arthur Conquest, town meeting member.
You're gonna grab the microphone, Arthur, sorry.
Right, sorry, thank you. Town meeting member, precinct 6, Arthur Conquest. I came before you February 13th, and the topic was the Juneteenth celebration, and the fact that I thought we needed to move forward as a community. And so someone in the public heard my presentation and contacted me, and we had been meeting either by email or we've had one Zoom meeting, and we intend to have a number of others going down the line. We have come to you with a plan, and we'd like to read it to you, and at some point, we'd like you to respond. Go ahead.
Thank you, Arthur. My name is Zaria Katakashian-Jones. Last year, Brookline for the Culture's Juneteenth block party saw close to 200 attendees, a testament to the power of community and the significance of honoring our history in a way that Juneteenth had not been done before in Brookline. With the support of 47 Black and Brown-owned businesses and organizations, we created a vibrant and inclusive Juneteenth celebration featuring activities, health services, and performances reflecting Juneteenth's true essence. We provided vital health resources, including on-site COVID-19 booster and flu shots, screenings for breast cancer and colon cancer, two of the leading causes of cancer-related death in the Black and Brown communities, blood pressure screenings, diabetes testing, and so much more. Today, myself, Yolandi Seeley, Tamu Jackson, and Adina Walker would like to formally request funding from the town of Brookline to support the Juneteenth Block Party celebration of 2024. The event will be had on June 19th from 12 to 6 p.m. once again at the Florida Ruffin Ridley School in Coolidge Corner. The Juneteenth Block Party is a community event aimed at commemorating Juneteenth, the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. It holds particular significance as it marks the day when enslaved African Americans in Texas finally learned of their freedom 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation had been issued. Juneteenth serves as a reminder of the struggles and triumphs of African Americans throughout history and provides an opportunity for reflection, education, and celebration.
You
The
have 30
event will-
seconds.
Oh, thank you. The event will feature various activities and performances, including the singing of the Black National Anthem, live performances by Sinha Capoeira and Toussaint the Liberator, on-site information for health resources, including vaccinations provided by community organizations like the Family Van. Celebrating Juneteenth is a meaningful way to honor African American history and culture and an important opportunity to promote unity, diversity, and inclusion within our community. The town of Brookline can
Time has
demonstrate.
expired. Please conclude
you.
your comments.
Oh, thank you. The town of Brookline can demonstrate its commitment to equity and social justice by supporting the Juneteenth Block Party. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're just going to give you a copy of this presentation as well as the schedule for the event, okay?
Okay, leave it on the table here.
Yeah, I will, okay? Thank you very, very much. One last thing, sorry. It's Black History Month still, and Bernard mentioned a book of poems that he is reading during Black History Month, and I'm reading something called Looking for Farrakhan. Very interesting book, okay? And that's my Black History Month reading that I wanted to recommend that
Thank
you
you.
at least take a look at. Who should I give it to?
Just put it on the table and we'll take it.
Thank you.
Okay, attendees can use the hand raise or Q&A feature if they'd like to indicate that they'd like to make a public comment. Or Bernard, let me know if you have anybody in person who'd like to speak.
I don't see anyone in the audience that has raised their hand.
And no one is using the hand raise or Q&A feature in the attendees list.
Okay, so that's the end of public comment, and we'll move on to our miscellaneous agenda. First of all, question of approving the following minutes of the meetings of the Select Board, February 13, 2024 and February 20, 2024. Any edits or comments to those meeting minutes? Seeing none, I move approval of the minutes for February 13 and February 20th of 2024. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Mike Sandman,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Next, I'd like to move approval in an omnibus fashion of items 3B through 3I. The select board members have not asked to discuss any items separately. I'll move approval of them together.
So it's a 3W. Yeah, we're all the way down to 3W.
Yes.
I'm separating the licensing from the regular. I mean, it's just the way I'm doing it.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry.
Any comments or questions regarding those items? I move approval of items 3B through 3I. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Mike Salmon,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
and chair votes aye.
Do want to thank the SIDA Foundation for their generous donation. Very kind of them.
Yes. You want?
They've been a wonderful partner with the community, and they've made that contribution yearly. It is great. It's great to have them as members of the community. We want to thank them again for that donation.
Yes, thank you. Next, I'd like to move approval in omnibus fashion of items 3J through 3, is it W now?
Yep.
3W, the select board is approving the actions in each item after hearings were held with staff and with the attendance of Paul Warren on Wednesday, February 21st. So that hearing enabled us to take the items for approval here at our meeting without the time that goes into a number of public hearings. So unless people have questions regarding these items, which are both grants of location and licenses, I'd like to move approval of items I lost it here.
J?
3J to 3W. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
I'm
Yes,
so
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to comment quickly. There's a memo in there for me and it refers to item 3K, but we actually had to move things around. That memo should refer to item 3L. That was a memorandum we issued subsequent to the hearing about a condition of approval for a grant of location after someone came in with a concern. And then with the 3S, change in operating hours for 477 Harvard Street with Mirchi Nation, I did just want to flag that there was a discussion of that item. The applicant had originally come in asking for 2 a.m. as the closing time. And after discussion, the panel approved 1 a.m., which is what other businesses close by had, with the understanding that the board in the near future is going to have a conversation about closing times for businesses by district so that it's equitable and we're not, accidentally creating policy piecemeal. So we will make sure that that conversation happens, and we want to thank the applicant for their patience and understanding on that front, as we, make sure that there's a systemic response rather than just individual businesses.
Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Mike Salmon,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Oh, and by the way, Miriam Ashkenazi is absent. She's traveling abroad, so that's why we only have 4 board members here. Okay. Next, our regular agenda or calendar. Start off with a housing production plan.
No, right? Isn't
Sorry, we
The agenda has changed.
moved this around a bit after.
Department,
Department
Okay.
budgets.
Starting with budgets.
I take my own notes in preparation for the meeting, and sometimes things change and my notes are out of date, so I apologize for that. So we're going to the budget hearing.
The select board is first,
Yeah.
I think.
Wait, hold on. Before we start,
Yeah, of course.
let's see. Okay, so we're starting budget hearings for this year. And these budget hearings allow the select board to review the budgets for individual departments of town government and add our views and perspectives to their budget requests. Our role is different from that of the advisory committee, who works up the budget and prepares it for presentation to town meeting for a vote. But our comments at this meeting, which will appear in the combined reports, our goals and objectives document that departments are aware of and will be a more formal part of the budget process beginning in fiscal year 2025. And our previous discussion at the joint hearing with the advisory committee all will play an important role in crafting the town's budget, even though the advisory committee will be presenting the budget as their budget. So let's start off with the select board, you say?
Yes.
Okay. Who's gonna who's gonna present on that? That you, Charlie?
I was muted. Yes, I'll be handling that tonight, Bernard. So, you should be able to see, a summary of the select board budget now. Am I right?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'll get started. So let me just start off by introducing myself for folks at home who don't know. My name is Charlie Young. I'm the Assistant Town Administrator for Finance. I'm here tonight to speak on the Select Board Office's budget, which encompasses the staff of the Select Board and the Town Administrator, has quite a few functions in the town. So let me just start by saying, honorable Select Board members, thank you for allowing me to join you remotely tonight. I want to extend additional thanks first to our office staff. We have a truly incredible team on the 6th floor, and it's a pleasure to work with them every day. It's an exciting time in the select board's office, even though we have a little uncertainty as we said goodbye last week to our assistant town administrator for operations, Devin Fields. We were for a very brief moment fully staffed, but we have that, and we have some great initiatives to look forward to in the upcoming year. So here we are showing a select board FY25 budget of 1 million, just over $1 million at $1,060,758. Primarily, those break down into a few different categories. Some of that is steps under salaries. You can see we're seeing a 2% increase in our total salary budget. But the major change this year is that we're adding $40,000 to the services budget for select board in order to support a new agreement with Brookline Interactive Group that will continue the hybrid services and support we've been receiving from them since COVID. Those were previously paid for using ARPA funds. And now, since we are deciding to continue doing hybrid meetings, and, as ubiquitously as we are, we have decided that we need to work with BIG to formalize an agreement spelling out those services. And IT has informed us that the level of work required would likely be equivalent to a full-time employee if the town were to take these services on. So we are seeing that $40,000 as a bargain, so to speak, as much as it is still a cost to bear. The only other increase you're seeing here is due to a rather significant increase in the cost of our PCs and laptops, which you might see across the town. That's the reason that I highlight it here on our budget. You won't see a 66% increase across town. In most cases, it's 10%, but some departments do have COVID era loaners that are coming on fresh leases, and those are causing a couple of departments to have a little bit of a spike there. So on to one of your first questions you asked departments, which is to come up with some accomplishments for the current year. We call it last year, but it's really FY24, the year we're in now. We hired our first communications officer, and we hired an office assistant to help support us with ARPA. To measure our success with this one, we might be looking at, for example, the amount of money we turn back in ARPA funds or don't turn back. Ideally, we will turn back none. The second accomplishment is that we implemented a new board and commission software, which is currently being implemented this month and next month, starting with the first few boards that are going to be using it. It's going to increase our transparency and increase efficiency. It's going to heavily streamline the posting process. And finally, this year we implemented a new license review process that the select board is very familiar with, but essentially has streamlined our public hearings and select board meetings by separating those and having those hearings separate from the select board. So for our goals for FY25, again, this is something the select board will be well acquainted with as we just went through the goals and accomplishments of the board. But here are a few that we selected for staff and for ourselves. Well, first, we want to make sure that we are spending our ARPA money on track and on time and getting the maximum amount of grant award that we can in accordance with federal guidelines. Tyler and Nicole in our office are working hard to monitor and track over 100 projects, which is no small feat. But we feel like we're on track to accomplish this goal. Now that we have a communication specialist, our second goal is to strengthen and improve our office's communications and engagement strategies. We believe this is an opportunity now to look at how we're doing communications across the town and in every department, even reviewing existing forms of communication like our financial plan on OpenGov and ways that we can improve our public-facing aspects of our work. And finally, we'd like to work through the town-school partnership this year, specifically to develop or finalize our agreements with the school for shared services and for revenue allocation. Really looking into that in the way that we had intended to before this budget season, and hopefully making some progress with the schools and the town school and advisory on that. Okay, so as far as new initiatives goes, we really are adding big this year, and we're very fortunate to have been able to add the communications officer last year. As you'll see, the FTEs tick up in FY24, and the office assistant for ARPA in FY25. So you'll see a tick up again there. This is as large as the select board office has been, as far as I'm aware. We're getting a lot done with what we have, but mind you, a couple of those positions are grant funded and they will eventually fall off. So finally, without budget constraints, what priorities would change for the department? And I think we have answered this similarly in each year, which is by saying that ultimately we could take all of the different aspects of the select board's office and turn them into divisions of their own. They could each have their own line items for supplies and services. We could expand on all of that work in meaningful ways, whether it's adding staff to communication to perform graphic design work or perform additional work that would augment that role, or whether it's on budgeting, it's considering fully funding and full-time funding for things like grant writers and grant administrators, or even financial planning. Financial capacity is the key to running an organization. It's the key to your adaptability when you face issues. We can always use more financial capacity. Licensing and resident services, while these are things we do now, we certainly could operate them better with additional resources if those resources were available. And so I think for us, our priorities wouldn't necessarily change, but we would be able to accelerate what we are able to do with additional budget capacity. So that is the end of the slideshow for the select board. I'm happy to take any question, but overall, a fairly simple budget, except for the addition of the hybrid services.
Thank you. And the addition of the communications person.
Well, we did do that in FY24. I just
Okay.
highlighted that as something we accomplished this year,
Right.
actually hiring the person on. But yes, appreciate that highlight.
And going forward, it will play an important role in many things that we do. Mike.
I'm very glad to see that $40,000 in there for Brookline Interactive, because we do get an enormous amount of help from them. I think it's important to say that we're probably not fully covering their costs. I think they're working on figuring out what their costs actually are loaded for their overhead. It's important for town bodies to know that when they ask for coverage from Brookline Interactive, it's not free. That is, somebody's paying for it. Either we're paying for it out of that $40,000, or in effect, and in many cases, they're paying for it out of a non-existent surplus. Just broadly, we need to be thinking with Brookline Interactive about the future stream of income that will support them, because they have been supported by fees from cable television providers. And as people cut the cord, including myself, those fees go down. So we need to be, not necessarily next year, but in future years, we need to be thinking with BIG, because they are and have become an integral part of the communication and the services to the town.
Paul.
Yeah, I agree with Mike, and of course, I want to thank BIG for all that they do.
Yeah.
I personally would not be able to keep up with all that's happening with our town if I was not able to go back and watch the recordings of various boards and commissions. I rely on it heavily, as I know many others do. So I do want to just thank BIG for all that they have done and they continue to do. My question is about the 40 grand and what it covers. The 40,000, is that, I know it's in our select board budget, but does that cover all boards and commissions, all meetings, town meeting, everything?
Yeah, it covers the work that BIG does for the town. It is an MOU about BIG's overall the services provided to the town.
Okay, and that includes storing our videos. We had a conversation about, I think maybe I'm talking about it again tonight.
Yes.
About storage of videos, and it covers all that.
Yes.
Okay, and then Charlie had his hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Charlie should fill this in.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, we're still working on the actual agreement with BIG, and that's something that I believe will be putting before select board very soon. We were talking about doing it next week. I have the draft agreement. It was passed on to me from Devin, and I just need to go through it and make sure that we are all set on our end with it. But the cable license fees that they are already paying provide for them to stream town meeting and select board, provide essentially the services that they were providing before COVID. The hybrid services that they're providing, such as maintaining the D10s, the one like the machine we keep in room 103 of Town Hall, and providing services after hours for school committee, select board, And for maybe advisory is on there as well. I'm not sure. I think it's limited. I think it's mostly limited. Providing after hours support to boards that are running hybrid meetings, but it is, you know, big basically gave us a price model that said, listen, we can provide basic support for 40,000, or we could scale that up to a much larger number and much more comprehensive support. And what we thought we could afford right now is the basic support model, which is after hours and which is some after hours support, and then during hours, 10 maintenance and other hybrid meeting maintenance. Again, IT told us that if they were to hire somebody to do this job, it would be a full-time employee.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Charlie, I'm going to reference a few numbers, and I'm just trying to, I'm hoping to get some clarification. So, in the select boards, or excuse me, in the section of the FY25 financial plan that takes the overall view of departments, there is a table of FTEs, full-time equivalent positions,
Sure.
that have changed. And it shows that the select board has added 2. And yet, if I go to the accounting for total salaries, I see that there is an increase of just $18,330. So I'm having a hard time squaring those 2 numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of those 2 FTEs should have been added in the FY24 column. And that was the communications officers. That position actually moved over to the select board budget in FY24.
Okay.
And we're, I'm working on the method that we have for tracking and reporting FTEs in OpenGov. It is actually a kind of manual process right now, as much as I hate to admit that. My goal is to make it more automated and hopefully capture some of those things that were missed in the prior year, like that position. The other one is the ARPA funded office assistant, and that is a no net increase to salaries because we're paying for it out of ARPA. So you don't see those funds within the operating budget. So the 18,000, the 2% is strictly speaking steps and regular increases.
So just a question for whoever can answer it. If we don't show ARPA funded parts of how we fund positions in the budget in front of us, where do we show it?
Sure. So that's all available on the ARPA page. And there is actually an ARPA page in the budget that links out to that and shows all of the projects that have been awarded, which include that number. So the financial plan is really the operating budget, and it does include additional items like the CIP, but it traditionally hasn't included, like we traditionally haven't had ARPA as an item on the budget table, for example. That's not something that's voted by town meeting. So for more information, I would say go to section 2, check out the ARPA page, and then check out the ARPA site that Tyler keeps updated with projects that have been awarded and expenditures.
I'm very grateful for the explanation. And I'm not going to say this as a question for you. This is just a question for all of us. I would love to have us at least give some thought to whether the method you just described for how we account for positions that have been funded, say from outside sources versus funded by revenue from our levy. Is that the system we want? Because for me, it lacks the ability to get the big picture of how many positions are in our budget in any given year, because it sort of separates out the positions that have outside funding sources, and it takes away the ability to try to analyze what are we going to do if we lose the funding for those positions. And how are we keeping track of positions that might get added to the budget because they were formerly funded from outside funds, without there being any question as to, wait a minute, did we know when we put them in the when we sustain them with these outside funds, did we commit to keeping them in our budget forever? Because we should have at some point taken account of the implications if we were going to, in fact, keep a position in the budget beyond the expiration of the outside funding. I hope I made that clear. I'm not even sure it was clear to myself, but
No,
It's
I
a
understood
question.
what you meant, John. Let me just quickly comment that if you go into the department section for each department, right? If you go into the section for select board page, on the table that shows the budget, right? Shows salaries, personnel, costs, et cetera. There is a line item labeled offsets, which describes all of the items in that budget that are being funded by grant offsets.
I was
And so
going to
you
ask
can,
about that.
yeah, so you can see in our budget which things are grant funded.
Yeah.
Now, again, if you go back to section 2 and you look at that large summary of all the departments, I have added a table underneath of it, which is at this point fairly rudimentary, John, and I'm hoping to improve on it in future years, that states very clearly how many FTEs within each department are funded by outside sources and whether those are grants, enterprise funds, whatever they have, CIP, whatever they happen to be. And the goal is actually to add one of those tables to each and every department section that says, here's all the FTEs in the department. Here's how many of those are funded by an outside source. And so I think, frankly, I'm on board with the suggestion you're making to continue to broadcast which positions are being offset, but feel free to look at the offsets line in any department budget. And if you have questions about what those offsets are, I'm happy to go through that. And I could explain what's included in our offsets line as well. For us, it's ARPA, and there may still be some HCA funds in there. And there may be some other grant funds in there as well.
Great.
Paul.
Yep. I'm going to follow on with John's line of thinking here just for a minute. So, Charlie, we had an exchange today where I asked about year-on-year growth of FTEs, and you sent me a link to a table that I have in front of me here. And it shows 5-year FTE growth by department with the 5-year change. And then below that, and I don't know if this is generally available to everybody. I hope it is. You have general fund FTEs funded by capital grants and other funds.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Is this what you were just describing?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if John has seen this. If not, maybe you could share the link with the select board. There in this list of FTE counts from general funded FTEs funded by capital grants and other funds, there's select board grants funded, and you have -2.
Right.
There's
So-
a -2. What does that mean?
So that's just referring to let's say you had an FTE count of 20 in the general fund, -2 would be 2 that are covered by grants. So a total of 18 FTEs funded by the general fund, right? That's how I'm thinking about
So is this the offset? Is what you're essentially, this is the offset?
That's what I'm referring to. Yep, exactly. Yep.
Okay, so in this list, I see there's some HCA funded positions. There's a police HCA funded position. Things of that nature. Is that basically what you're just describing to John? Is the table?
Exactly. But you can also go, the other thing I was describing, so if I could share my screen if it would be helpful, but you're on the select board department page and you look at the budget table, there's also a line labeled offsets that tells you the total dollar amount, and it's a negative amount that is being offset out of the salary budget. And this is true across all departments, by the way. If you're looking at planning and you wanted to look at how much of their community development budget is offset by grants, there's an offsets line in that budget showing exactly how much we are charging back to CDBG.
CDBG or another, or it
Exactly.
could be,
Or another
it
source.
could be ARPA, right? And so it does raise the question of, I think what John had, maybe I'll ask it differently. Do we have a full sense of the current reliance on ARPA for positions?
Yeah, absolutely we do.
Okay.
So
and
we have,
okay, hold on.
I'm sorry, I can describe it for you if you'd like, Paul. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No, I was just, it was kind of I just wanted to get a sense, do we have a handle on that? And it would be good to know what that number is and when does that number go away?
Sure. So we have 2 ARPA funded positions in the select board's office. I'm going off the top of my head. The total for those is going to be around 150K. The plan for those positions is to use them through the duration of ARPA, but they will not be needed for ARPA administration after ARPA is over. The other two positions we have in the town are I believe it's the emergency preparedness coordinator in the health department, which was added during COVID, and the cybersecurity analyst in the IT department, which was added around the same time. And there will need to be a conversation around whether to implement both of those positions in the operating budget after ARPA funds expire. There is actually going to need to be, that's going to have to come up, I would say, in next year's budget discussions or the following year, one or the other, because the funds run out in FY27. So we should probably begin talking about those next year. Those are on our radar. And those two positions are likely another 150,000 or so. So that is our full reliance. We don't have any other FTEs, Paul, on ARPA right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion of the select board budget? Can I make one more point? You sure?
Yeah, I'm sorry if we're taking a lot of time on this, but we're just getting started and there's a few general questions that I'd love to just pose that apply across the board. And this, again, Charlie, this isn't for you to answer. It's just for all of us to think about as we go forward. Every one of these department budgets is going to include at more or less at the bottom of the page, if you will, something called the performance workload indicators. My sense is it's been quite some time since we gave some thought to, the current performance and workload indicators. And are these really the performance workload indicators we want to have? And to take, at least one example. Yes, it's a great idea to track the number of appointments to management positions that were made through the town administrative office. But should we also track the number of board, commission, and committee appointments that the select board has made in the office, the town administrator office has processed and made? Because that's a really essential part of what we do is our appointments to boards, committees, and commissions, but but that's not on here. And then we have number of percentage of renewed licenses that were paid online. That's an interesting number. I'm not sure that the select board should get any credit for it. And I'd love to sort of come up with a short list if we could at some point during our sessions, let's say our semi-annual sort of seminar sessions. It would be wonderful to come up with our own updated list of what we think are the meaningful performance workload indicators for the select board. And then that would apply across the board to all of the other departments that have performance workload indicators. So just putting that thought out there.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I think those indicators go back decades, and
They look like they.
I don't think they've been, looked at
Yeah.
since then.
The thing that strikes me, Bernard, is that, I'm sorry if I,
Go ahead.
is that very few of them, if any, are actually, customer facing. How are we doing customer satisfaction? How long is it taking us to resolve a request on Brookline Online? Metrics that really how we're doing overseeing and providing services to our community. So anyway, it would be a good discussion to have, John.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Great job.
Yes.
Next, Finance Department. I see Lincoln Heineman is coming to the microphone.
Good evening.
Excuse me about my coughing. That's life.
So, good evening. Thank you, Chair Green. So my name is Lincoln Heineman, the town's Director of Finance. And I know, thank you, Charlie. Charlie's putting up and going to help me run through the slides for the Finance Department's fiscal year 2025 budget. Joining me here are representatives from management of each of the Finance Department divisions. Rashid Belhassin, the Chief Assessor, is here joining us in person, Also joining us remotely is the payroll director, our new payroll director from October, Don DeVito, who we're very happy to have on board. The assistant comptroller, Michelle Tejeda, and the procurement officer, Rick Saville. So thank you, Charlie. So to briefly describe the overview, as the board may recall, at town meeting last year, prior to town meeting, special town meeting in November, there were 4 divisions within the finance department. At town meeting, agreed to add a 5th division, which was previously a subdivision within Treasury Collection, to be the new payroll director, who again is Don DeVito, who we're very happy has joined us in October. So the rest of the duties, the number of professional staff has stayed the same. That change did not entail an addition of staff, but simply a reorganization of making payroll division head. As you can, the only real change here from previous years is that the payroll division, as you can see here, is processes payroll both for the town and the schools. The schools do have their own payroll staff, but all of the payroll ultimately flows through the town side. And something that sometimes folks may not think about, and was certainly a heavy lift last calendar year and the beginning of this fiscal year, is implementing new labor contracts and financial implementation of those, particularly this year with fire and police, was a pretty big lift, and we're happy to have those in place now. So next slide, please, Charlie. Thanks. So here's the blizzard of numbers. Oh, and that actually looks a little less visible than I was hoping for, but most importantly is the bottom figures. So here's each division is listed here, but most importantly, you can see in the bottom figures, the finance department budget overall is actually decreasing slightly to the recommendation for fiscal year 2025. Discuss a little bit later on as to why that is, but no major changes budgetarily with respect to the recommendations for fiscal 25. So with respect to accomplishments in this past year, the primary thing that we're thinking about in general with the finance department, and particularly with the Treasury Collection Division, is maintaining the town's AAA bond rating. We are one of 13 municipalities out of 351 statewide, which have maintained a AAA rating, that the highest rating with Moody's. As note here, as the board knows, that rating, the highest rating, was reaffirmed by Moody's on Friday. That's certainly great news for the town's borrowing costs. As a note here, Moody's noted in their full credit opinion that it was based in part on strong fiscal management and formal policies, including multi-year forecasting and a strong pension funding plan, and healthy contributions towards its OPEB, other post-employment, its liability. So we're certainly pleased with that accomplishment over the past year. Another accomplishment I want to note is that of the purchasing division. So the purchasing division, led by Chief Purchasing Officer Dave Giannakakis, runs several joint procurements, the most significant one of which is joint purchasing amongst several other municipalities, and it is also accessible by other entities, but several municipalities in our area, for jointly purchasing several different kinds of fuels, including gasoline, number 2, heating oil, and diesel. So one of the the big accomplishments perennially, and certainly this year continuing, is the opening of those bids and having contracts throughout fiscal year 2025 that are significantly below the spot price of where the town would buy those at on the open market. So specifically, $1 in savings per gallon going into fiscal 25 from the spot prices now for both heating oil and diesel, and 43 cents in savings for gasoline. And in addition, we're pleased that I think largely due to the timing of when Dave runs that procurement, it is also those prices for fiscal 25 are also lower than those we're receiving now in fiscal year 24. And then with respect, and Rashid is here and did a lot of work on this during the past year, and particularly in this past fall, the town completed the implementation for the new means-tested senior citizen property tax exemption that was passed by town meeting as a request for home rule legislation, and was passed by the legislature, signed by the governor. That fiscal year 24 was the first year. We actually did not end up having any folks who are receiving that means-tested exemption. And that's actually, I want to touch on that with respect to the select board's request about metrics. So I think the metrics, for the first two accomplishments here are pretty self-explanatory about paying less for fuels, maintaining our AAA. In this case, I think it's important to think of this metric as it not being the metric of the number of folks who are actually receiving that means-tested exemption. We did go out, Rashid and his staff and myself, and we did go out and seek new avenues to get information out about this exemption and other senior and exemptions, also other exemptions available to those who are visually impaired and who are veterans. And I think we did get the word out quite a bit, including at the farmers market, including at a meeting of the Brookline Community Action Network. But what we found is a lot of folks, when they looked into it, discovered that they were not eligible for it because of the restrictions of the program. However, I do think it was certainly a lot of work to put it in place, and I think it's an area that we want to continue to look at how we can maximize tax exemptions and tax breaks for those who need them. With respect to the fiscal 25 goals, certainly it's a primary focus for the finance department to maintain the town's AAA rating. And one of the factors in maintaining that goal is the Deputy Town Administrator, Melissa Goff, and I have certainly had a lot of conversations, and I think it's something that will be percolating towards the board in the coming months. Is in the last week, 2 weeks, as we were going through the rating process for the town's upcoming major debt issuance, became clear for the first time that Moody's is making recommendations for larger reserve amounts than they have in the past. And so part of keeping that goal of maintaining our AAA rating would be to respond to those, to probably come at the select board's direction, probably come to you with some draft amendments, some tweaks to our fiscal policies to respond to those new recommendations from Moody's, and have the select board make a policy decision on where the town wants to go with respect to those. A second major goal for fiscal 25 is completing the disparity study. That's the joint study with Somerville to examine where we are currently and to examine the possibility of having a sheltered market program for historically disadvantaged or historically businesses owned by historically disadvantaged citizens. This has been proceeding at pace. It is on track to be complete by the close of this calendar year. There have been many meetings with the consultants, with their data gathering, with going through the specifics of procurement in Massachusetts, and then even more specifically dialing down into Brookline. But that's certainly a major goal for us going forward into 25. And then again, continuing the outreach with respect to tax exemptions that are available for those who need them, who may be having trouble paying their real estate taxes. Part of that goal is to ensure that we're maximizing everything that is allowed currently by state law, and making sure that the word is continuing to get out there in new avenues to those who may be eligible for those. In terms of long-term goals and objectives and new initiatives. This is the first one with respect to partnering with town departments and the town administrator's office to electrify more of the town's fleet. This is certainly something that is high on the list for the purchasing division. There are frequent communications between our chief purchasing agent and, for example, the fire department. Right now, for example, they're not really fully electric vehicles for the fire department out there on the market. But certainly it's something that we're continuing to look at, closely monitoring as they come on, and seeing where that price point is, where they start to become cost effective for municipalities. Another item is increased collaboration with the school department. Certainly in the past year, we've found success there has been in addition to our payroll director coming on board, which again, we're very pleased with. There has been a new payroll and benefits manager brought on at the school department, and that has certainly allowed for some increased collaboration, increased efficiencies. And certainly I think there's other areas that we can find throughout the finance department to continue to be effective in that, certainly in procurement and the year-end process. And certainly also in accounting, the comptroller's office, the schools have expressed an interest in revising their chart of accounts, and that's certainly something that we'd be receiving their direction from in the comptroller's office to help them with. A couple other quick things would be certainly improved use of technology. There are small things that I think would nevertheless be effective in increasing our efficiency. And for example, briefly, would be implementing electronic W-2 forms, tax forms for employees. Small things like that will increase efficiency. Benefit options for employees, and I should be clear, I'm not talking about benefits that would increase the town's costs, but in this case, for example, offering a post-tax Roth 457B. So the town offers a 457B, the equivalent of a 401k for employees in private as opposed to the public. But it's something that again wouldn't have a cost to the town, but would increase a benefit for employees. And then finally, we have a great leadership team in the department. Some folks are probably getting towards the end of their careers, and so we certainly a long-term goal to make sure that we have succession plan in place and we have a path forward to increase our leadership team. To address it, and I wanted to mention, each of these goals certainly is related in some way. We can talk about how specifically, but is related in some way to the goals, the fiscal year 2025 goals that the select board voted, and I think certainly appreciated those because there's certainly some interface, quite a bit of interface there. As far as the remaining questions that the board asked department heads to address during their presentations for the fiscal year 2025 budget, as far as demand for the finance department services and how we see that going forward, I certainly think there's an increase in demand for a lot of services, but it's really less of a volume thing sometimes and more of a complexity issue. So, for example, in the treasurer collector's office, we increasingly get a lot of asks for intensive help with helping people walk through how to pay their taxes automatically through our auto pay system, or how to pay them online as opposed to in person. So, of course, we're still very happy to collect taxes in person, and we like to see people in person. Certainly, we've had some gradual uptick in online, but some of that on the back end has meant, for example, some intensive, 30-minute conversations helping folks get through that process. So, again, I think it's more complexity rather than volume in many cases. With respect to adding, subtracting, or finding efficiencies in terms of full-time equivalents, this budget does not envision any. This proposed budget does not envision any increase in staff, and actually something that the assessing division implemented during this fiscal year 2024 was a decrease in one staff. We felt that there was an efficiency there based on Rashid's good advice that to regularize the positions and the pay across assessing assistants and across those titles, and to ensure that all of them are being paid the same for the same work, regardless of whether, for example, the assessing was happening for personal property or real estate. As far as the select board's accomplishments and goals, I mentioned a lot of the goals, and certainly there's a direct connection to a lot of the goals that you set. I think they're, from our perspective in finance, I certainly think those make sense with respect to maintaining our AAA rating, to seeking to encourage housing stability through the finance department's part. I see that is to ensure that those who would be eligible for tax exemptions know that they're out there, possibly in the future examining whether or not we would want to seek special legislation for other tax exemptions, but certainly ensuring that those that exist now, the people who are eligible for them know about them. And finally, as far as budgetary limitations, no, there's certainly budget restraints, but certainly I don't think the long-term goals of the finance department would be changed with less or more funds available. So with that, thank you very much for your time. Very happy to take any questions. And again, the other leadership folks are here too if you have specific questions about other divisions.
Thank you. Let me start off by saying that there's been a big push to increase our pilots over the last few years. I noticed, though, in the chart in the financial plan that over the last few years, pilots have been pretty steady. They've gone down over the last couple of years, and they're basically steady at around a little less than $2 million. Is there any possibility of increasing pilots, or is that just what we can get?
I think there's a possibility to increase. There's certainly been an increased outreach from myself to those who are not currently participating in pilots. As the board, I'm sure recalls, there were recommendations from the moderators committee on pilots, and one of those key recommendations was increased outreach to those who don't participate and seeking their participation. That increased outreach has not yet resulted in any new pilots, unfortunately. As the board knows, it's an entirely voluntary program. So I think the way to continue that is to continue that dialogue with those who don't participate, to continue to reiterate the existence of the joint purchasing. We talked about the joint purchasing earlier for example, heating oil, and those who could participate in pilots could also access our joint purchasing, for example, for office furniture, for office supplies. And so it's continuing, I think, that carrot of frequent, friendly outreach, reiterating what the town can offer. But at the end of the day, if folks don't want to participate, they won't.
Yeah. And my question was not actually questioning how hard your department works on those pilots, but just wanted to get a sense of how it's going. We appreciate the work that the department has done over many years to develop the pilot program and succeed in getting a significant number of pilots in place. So was it Paul, you had your hand up first?
Maybe Mike.
I haven't raised my hand yet.
Maybe Mike was first.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you. I think that was very useful, very helpful. I have just one comment, which is that the schools changing their chart of accounts is long overdue, and whatever help you can give them would be great. I'm intimately familiar with that budget from a prior life, and their chart of accounts needs work. I have two questions for you. One is that in the Moody's report, there's they have a standard that we don't quite meet, which is to have 20% of revenues in reserves. And I believe that that's an increase in their benchmark from what used to be 10% is my recollection. And so presumably if they've suddenly doubled it, they're giving a certain amount of time for communities to catch up. But that seems like and have they made any comments about that?
So we're delving deeper into that. So that all, it was a surprise, not a surprise not only to us, but to our financial advisors. I think it's probably a surprise to a lot of municipalities this year. We're delving deeper into what exactly they mean by that. We are, according to their metrics, actually meeting that 20%. So we're slightly above 23.1%.
Okay.
What we're seeking complete clarification on is what exactly they're counting towards that. And it appears as though, and this is preliminary, but it appears as though what they are, this new metric that Moody's is recommending is seeking undesignated, unreserved funds, not just from the general fund, but all funds. So that would include, primarily that hasn't traditionally been included from the enterprise funds, from water, sewer, and golf.
Right. Okay.
So that appears as what it is. We are meeting their metric now.
Okay.
At 23%. We are on the lower end of this new metric that they've decided on very recently. And so, but we're seeking complete clarification on that. And then that I expect would be part of whatever draft recommendations may come from myself and Melissa to this board for your policy determination.
Thank you. The other question, my last one, is with regard to purchasing, and I may be out of the loop on this, and if I am, I'd be very, very happy to hear it. We've been talking about having purchasing policy that would enable us to prioritize doing business with minority-owned businesses, and it seemed like it took a while to get that going. What's the status of that?
So that's the study that's ongoing now with Griffin and Strong, the town's contractor, that will be done now if it's on schedule, which I certainly expect it will be, by the close of this calendar year.
All right.
And then the results of that study will inform whether or not by law the town may do what you're suggesting.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I follow up on one of Mike's questions? To include the enterprise funds into the calculation of reserves as a function of revenues, I guess I don't understand. The enterprise funds wouldn't be available to pay debt service under any circumstances, so it's really not a relevant, as I understand it, reserve requirement. So I guess I'd like to just make sure that once you get an understanding from Moody's that you come back and let us know what's.
Not only that, but that presumably they would include the revenue from enterprise funds as well. If you're going to, so it like the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. What's going on in their minds?
And of course, and so some of our debt, appropriately so, is funded by water and sewer and golf, if that debt is directly related to that, as you say. But it's certainly a small portion of our debt.
John?
This might be a question for Rashid. But before I ask it, let me just add my words of thanks to everyone, both those who are here tonight, those who are not here tonight, everyone from your finance department at every level, to have received once again, the top rating. And you mentioned it, I'll mention it again. What did you say? Only 13 municipalities in Massachusetts have a AAA rating. Is that the number you
That's
used?
correct.
Yeah.
Moody's, yes.
Yeah. So we're in a very special club, and it does save us money, in case people were wondering. So thank you again for that achievement. Now my question, and Rashid, if you would step up to the microphone. It's a little bit of a speculative question. I keep hearing and reading about a situation that exists in the Boston office market involving vacancies, a high rate of vacancies, and the anticipated, hasn't necessarily really turned out that way just yet. But there's an anticipation that there's going to be quite a substantial number of office property owners coming into the Boston Assessing Department for reductions in their assessments, in their assessed values, and that's going to impact Boston's tax collections in a way that will shift burdens to residential owners and that kind of thing. What have we seen in Brookline so far? We have it's not as significant as Boston's, but it's a significant piece of our commercial tax base is office space. What are we seeing?
Well, unlike Boston, we actually don't have large office buildings. We do have small office buildings, and the vacancy has not been as bad as we've seen in Boston. And in fact, judging by the appeals that we received this year, we probably gotten about 2 from office buildings. So the vacancy, there is some vacancy, but it's in the 5%, 6% range. So it's not as bad. It's very comparable to retail. So it hasn't had any major negative effect so far. We haven't seen that. If it does, then we'll eventually have to see what the requests are and what the impact will have on other sectors.
Is there anything you've seen that perhaps should be flagged as a potential impact on our ability to collect revenues?
Well, actually, let me go back for a second. In fact, some of the buildings in 23, we haven't looked at 23 yet, but we haven't used the 23 data yet, calendar year 23. But based on the preliminary observations, we do have an increase in occupancy in some of the office space based on the returns we've received so far. So if anything, I think it would have a positive impact because of the increase of the occupancy.
Yeah.
Slight increase. So we don't see an increase in vacancies. We see the opposite. Very small, but it's substantial. So small, but substantial compared to what we had vacancy we had in prior 2 years. So
good to know. One last question, sort of in this general area. It's notable that there are a few sites in Brookline where we had great expectations of development, and yet the sites are still sort of lying fallow. No development happening. What happens when time goes by with a site that is marked for some future development that would be, a substantial addition of, $1 million or more in tax revenues to the town, but the development just isn't happening. Do we engage in discussions with those developers to try to figure out what the problem is?
Well, we can. We assess property. We don't really engage developers for future developments, but we do assess what's there. So if there's any site that's in development stages, we assess the land, obviously, and whatever is on it. Once the development happens, then it's assessed at 100%. So I'm not sure that question will probably be for planning versus.
I was going to say you have planning coming up.
That's fine with me. Yeah. We'll wait till they step up. Yeah.
Well,
good.
Yeah, Rashid, I wanted to, don't sit down. I do have a question for you as well. And first, thank you to everybody for Lincoln. Excellent job. I echo the sentiments of John and others, and my thanks to all that you're doing to keep our rating very high. I'm curious about if we have any sense, I'm not sure how you would do this, but do we have any sense of how many of our properties are owned but not occupied, where we have investors coming in and they're just sitting empty? I can think of a couple that I believe it's happening, but do we have any sense of that?
Residential?
Residential.
Yeah. So when you say occupancy,
so these are investors just buying it and they don't
not
They,
renting it
and they're
out.
not renting it and they don't intend to move into it.
We don't see a lot. I mean, we do have, if you're referring to singles, twos and threes and condominiums, the exemption, the residential exemption definitely will give us a sense of what's occupied, what's not. Single families are about 80, close to 85% owner occupied. There are very few that I know of. They're vacant, maybe 2 or 3 that we know they've been vacant for a few years. But the rest of them are definitely either rented or owner occupied. Condominiums, it's about half. Half are owner occupied and half are possibly rented, but we're not aware of.
Because I know other communities have been concerned about this. I think Boston's been concerned about
Yeah.
investors coming in and sitting on property and it's actually not being used for housing. It's being used more as just,
Parking money.
old cash, right?
Yeah.
Park to park money.
Yeah.
And again, it's a concern as investment opportunities dwindle in other areas of the economy. Housing is still, a great place for investors to park money, whether that's overseas or local. So it's just a concern. And I don't know if it's not you're not seeing that. You don't have a sense of that at this point.
No. Again, for example, single families, I know a couple that have been vacant for a few years now, and that is very small number.
Yeah.
Considering the.
But those are vacant and the ones I'm familiar with, and they're dilapidated, right? They're not being taken care of. That's not the
They're
situation I'm
not,
talking about.
yes.
Yeah.
They're.
Okay, that's fine. And then while I have you, I'm going to admit something. It's almost impossible for me to figure out my real estate tax bill. And just figure out like how much my real estate taxes are. And I'm not looking for an answer, but I'm hoping that we could initiate an effort to try to make our real estate tax bills more readable, so you can actually understand what your total tax burden is.
Yeah.
But it's just a thought. And I'm been around the block a few times, but I still have a heck of a time trying to figure out what our real estate taxes are. But that's
During when the tax bill goes out, we get the calls about there's one part that's confusing is the quarterly payments. So the first 2 preliminary payments, a lot of times there are underpayments because of what happens in December when we set the tax rate, when we have new assessments, the tax bill goes up, so you have to make up for the underpayment for August and November. But there's a field that it says total tax for the year. There's a top of the tax bill that says the amount of taxes, that's for the year, the entire year, covering all 4 quarters.
Yeah.
But people get confused when they get the third and fourth quarter, they go up because of the underpayment from August and November. So they say, why is my tax bill increasing? But it's not. In fact, well, it might be increasing, but it's not.
I'm not looking for a solution, or I'm just letting you know that if I'm confused, I suspect other residents maybe not. Maybe I'm just I'm not as bright as the rest.
Yeah,
of
no,
you.
just two points on that. So just to further expand a little bit on what Rashid just said, part of the confusion is due to state law. So for those municipalities like us, like almost all municipalities in Massachusetts, which bill quarterly, the first 2 quarters, quarters 1 and 2, due on August 1st and November 1st, typically, are based on last year's taxes because the tax rate isn't set until November.
Yeah.
And so that's the underpayment that Rashid's referring to. And so then the large increase that sometimes people experience for quarter 3 is the first time where it is the actual taxes. And again, it's making up for quarters 1 and 2. So it's a source of confusion. It's something
I assume it generates a lot of phone calls, a lot of questions.
it does.
That's all.
Yeah,
My point is this,
and-
I'm not, again, I'm not looking for it to be solved. If there's something that we could do with information design, data design, explanations, I think would go a long way in helping residents understand exactly what they're paying.
And that's the other challenge, is that how the tax bill looks is very prescribed by the state Division of Local Services, which is part of the State Department of Revenue. So there may be a few little tweaks we can do, but I'm not sure under their rules that we need to follow. it will look how you want.
I don't want you to
So,
spend too much time on that.
Yeah, no.
I just raise it up, and I had two other quick questions. And I think this would be within your sphere of responsibility, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's Chaz's. When was the last time we visited the free cash waterfall policy? As a the board or the town? Do we know? The free cash waterfall.
Not sure. I think I have the policy, and I think it may have been last reviewed 2011. I believe.
2011.
I believe.
Okay. I'm curious about it. And the reason why I raise it is, we now have new source of fundings for the Housing Trust Fund. We've got CPA funds. Maybe it's just time to, we don't have to change it, but maybe it's time to possibly just dust it off and take a look at it and see if there's any changes. And I have a similar question about CIP priorities. When was the last time we visited how we're allocating CIP funds? Do we have must-have dollars that we have to fund first, and then, second level priorities, third level priorities? And when was the last time we visited our CIP allocation policy? Questions that
I
I have.
believe that's also 2011.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the Town of Brookline's fiscal policies last approved by the Select Board June 28th, 2011. So I believe that is.
So that's 13 years ago. Might be worthwhile a visit over the summer or sometime.
I would say
some of these
too-
policies that haven't been touched in a long time.
Yeah, the CIP is a little more malleable than the free cash waterfall. The CIP really does have, as you pointed out, things of clear need. For example, school maintenance, maintenance and upkeep in general, some of those things that are put into the capital improvement plan. And then we have different departments have different schedules, and that kind of triggers how priorities are made. For example, we have a policy on how on the rotation of how and when playgrounds are upgraded. We
Yeah.
follow that, and that informs what goes in where in the CIP.
Right. And that my latest thing that I'm just hanging on to with all 10 fingers is the condition of our public way. And I don't know if that's a CIP policy issue, if there's other issues in the way, but it's just, if these things haven't been looked at since 2011, it may be time to revisit them as we go through our strategic process. I don't think it's a next week thing, but I would hope we'd leave open the door to possibly have looking at these things. So thank you, Lincoln. Well done.
Hey, any other question? John, did you want?
That is good ideas.
Mhm. Okay, thank you, Lincoln.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Good
it.
evening.
I did want to flag the 7 o'clock noticed hearing.
Okay.
We had a noticed hearing for 7 o'clock for the potential appeals from the MBTA tree removal request. It is my understanding that there was an appeal lodged and it was withdrawn. Let me just pull this up. I want to make sure that it's in the record. The objection was made and withdrawn based on, at the hearing, the MBTA's commitment to produce a letter from a civil engineer certifying that the removal of the tree is necessary in order to maintain public safety, and the reimbursement of the town for the cost of purchasing and planting 6 3-inch DBH trees. So we want to thank the community for raising their concerns. The written objection was withdrawn. Since there were no objections filed at the conclusion of the hearing, there is no need to hold an appeal hearing. So I just wanted to note that for the record before we keep going.
Great, thank you. Okay, next, we have the Planning and Economic Development Department. Oh, Ms. Bruton.
Good evening. Let me just pull up some slides. Hold on just a second.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening. My name is Kara Bruton. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development. Here to talk about the budget for our department. I am not going to have many numbers in the presentation. You have all of that in front of you in the budget book that was carefully put together by so many people. I'm going to focus my presentation on the questions that you all asked, and then, of course, open for any Q&A. I'm going to do that in 10 slides. So here we go. Wanted to start off by talking about the highlights of the department, and then in the last fiscal year, and then take a step back and just kind of refresh everybody's memory about what the department's mission is. Then talk to you about how we measure that as we move forward, getting that mission in the future accomplished. Talk about what our top goals are in the next fiscal year and why those projects, why not others? That's something that you all asked. And then finally, how will we measure that as we look forward? So that's what I'm going to go over. And I see that the closed captions here are right over the slide deck.
Yes.
I don't know if I can do anything about that.
Charlie.
Charlie, can you move the caption?
I'm not sure if I can. I could try running it on my end.
Way to do it. I'm not sure how.
Is it running off of the one out here? Because I can move it.
Yes, Chaz, it might actually be right there on the presentation station for you to move.
Great, thank you. And this slide deck is also on the department webpage and under About Us as well. So highlights from this fiscal year, which we're finishing up. Our department enabled the largest affordable project in 50 years in the town of Brookline. So this is 32 Marion Street, Brookline Housing Authority. They're adding another 60 units. One thing that you all may not know is what happens behind the scenes. When you walk down and see that site, you'll see construction fencing up there with 11 financial partners. Thank you. And what that means behind the scenes is that we're coordinating federal funds and local funds in the pre-planning phases, in the permitting phases, in the construction phases, multiple closings on construction documents that we're involved with as a financial partner, coordinating with those other 10 other financial partners, all of their lawyers, all of our lawyers, and making that, actually happen. So the construction closing was last December. It was a big celebration. And a smaller piece, just so that you all kind of know, with some of the federal funding compliance requirements, it's more than just paperwork. We also serve in a way as doing some environmental assessment. It needs to be a third party in order for BHA to comply with some of those federal funding regulations. So just a glimpse of kind of what happens behind the scenes. It's not just writing a check. Another big thing that happened this last fiscal year, many of you were there, thank you. We had 3 businesses that started up in the JFK area, thanks to some of the ARPA funding. This was the first pop-up that was town supported that has opened. And that just the temporal nature of it also has brought increased media to our commercial areas, in addition to the benefit to the business owners you see here, as well as the improvements made to the building and how it interfaces with the public way. We also spent some time on zoning, if you remember last year, and those efforts resulted in, thanks to you all, resulted in zoning that's in place now for more affordable housing, both at the Walnut High Street property, which the Brookline Housing Authority controls, and that zoning in place is going to allow them to be more competitive with state and federal funding. But we also, in combination with that, are going to be able to pilot some tree canopy standards that we had put in the zoning piece for the first time. And this is really important because it means when other private developers come knocking at our door and say, hey, we'd like to rezone our property, we say, well, look, BHA is willing to do tree canopy standards, not, tree replacement, but an actual standard to create tree canopy, whether or not there's any canopy to begin with. So that's an important piece that might have gotten lost in the shuffle. And then, of course, the Harvard Street work enables us to pilot a form-based code while requiring on-site affordable units. And then as a footnote for this presentation, we did end up complying with the MBTA Communities Act, thanks to town meeting and all of you for doing that. So taking a step back, our mission kind of on a couple different scales, we believe that we're responsible for positively affecting the people that live and work here today, as well as those that could be here, part of the Brookline community in the future. We get a lot of really good candidates for staff in our department because at the local level, we have an impact on the region's housing crisis, on the national systematic racial inequities, and on the global climate emergency. And so being able to make a real difference at a local level that people can see is something that really drives the heart behind many of our planners. So how do we measure that? This is something new that we'll get to in a next agenda item, but we have been for a couple of years measuring the percentage of housing units that are actually deed restricted affordable. And you can see a big jump, right after 1970 when a lot of that product went online with programs that were kicking off back then. We do believe because of the kind of backlog of 40B projects, as well as the Brookline Housing Authority properties that we're helping with and municipal properties that we've all talked about, like Babcock Street, that we can get to 9.2% in the next 10 years. Another metric that I thought would be interesting tonight is talking about the percentage of historically significant buildings that aren't demolished. So it used to be that we would just say, here's the number of cases we had. But we are, for the last couple of years, we've been tracking of those cases that come to the Preservation Commission where they want to demolish a building, how many of those are saved? So this isn't, increasing dramatically, but it's a significant difference. Not only is that a community well-being goal because people are not seeing buildings demolished in their neighborhood as much, it's also a sustainability goal, which ZEAB and others point out to as well, that some of the things that we do affect more than one goal at once. So this is a good positive shift. We think that some of that in the last couple of years was likely due to increase in construction loan interest rates going up, just very simply. And some of that might have been due to the work that Maria Morelli did in our office on the T5 zoning districts, where we adjusted the zoning a little bit down so that the incentive to demolish a building wasn't as high compared to what's there. But we also worked with the Preservation Commission and those standards that are there so that everybody was working together to make sure that the goal was that those buildings not be demolished. Finally, this is a goal that we've been tracking for the last several years, kind of buried in the department web pages while the town is working on a disparity study, which will legally allow us to make choices and policy decisions in order to correct the way we're spending money compared to different demographics. We have been tracking what's in our control, which is funding that the department spends. So the column on the left is a stacked bar chart showing in the Boston metro area, and this is based on Boston study. And this is just looking at services, so not construction. We don't do a lot of construction, not supplies. We don't order a lot of supplies, but services we do. That's a big part of our budget. And you can see there that, so the blue is the biggest thing that jumps out. Those in the services area, in the Boston metro area, services generally, professional services, something about 10% of companies are available to do that work and are Black American owned. We have been tracking our own spending. So you'll see 2018 to 2021. That was the first time we kind of tracked over a couple of years. And of course, this swings wildly. We have a very small budget, but we still think it's important to report it. We did see an increase in just the overall the minority spending of our services, but we look forward to encapsulating this with all of the town spending and also all the town objectives as the disparity study is completed. This next graphic is way too complex and it's all just for a concept. So, what are our top new objectives and why? Our top new objectives impact multiple goals. So earlier we talked about the mission, right? So launching the public phase of the comprehensive plan that impacts housing, that impacts racial equity, that impacts community well-being, that impacts climate. Similar with these other priorities, the Brookline Housing Authority, Walnut High redevelopment, the CPA grant process, we will be reviewing those outcomes in this first grant cycle and looking at, how awards were made with an equity lens, and then suggesting any process adjustments to the CPA committee. And then the other objective we have here is developing Tox-Teth-Perry neighborhood design standards, and that's both on the regulatory zoning side as well as preservation standards, similar to what we did with the T5 NH district that I was talking about earlier, the goal of preserving significantly historic buildings, reducing demolitions, covering multiple goals at the same time.
Kara, can I ask you, the previous slide to this one, is there a number for that? Because I'm going to ask you a question about it.
Is there a number?
Yeah,
One prior.
one prior to that.
Slide 10.
Okay.
1160.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So why these projects? Why not others? This is just, again, conceptual. What we take into account is what can we work on that is both already community supported, documented community support. That includes the town administrator, that includes you all, that includes the public as, a whole body. That includes town meeting resolutions, right? All of those are ways that we are getting feedback of what has community support. On the horizontal axis, we consider definitely what's the most efficient use of our resources. What can we get done that's going to have the biggest impact compared to the number of mostly staff time that's needed to get it done. And a lot of that depends on, again, how much community support there is. The size of the circles, again, conceptually, are how big of an effort is this for us? So the comprehensive plan, it's somewhat conceptual, right? It's kind of in the middle of how efficient of use of our resources it is, but it's very, very well supported by the community. It's something we're doing, and it is a big effort. Compare that to the dot that's on the very bottom, broadly expanding our accessory dwelling unit allowances that will be moving forward a sliver of that this spring town meeting with our support. But we and the HAB chair and the building department need to look at the entire decision-making cycle that property owners have when they're trying to figure out whether or not to build an accessory dwelling unit. And that's going to take a lot of effort. And it's not something that we've heard very clear community support, exactly where, what kind, what type of ADUs, where, what neighborhood. So we feel like the first step is for us to broadly outreach both to existing homeowners as well as the community to get a better sense of how we might progress that into a project in the coming years. So how are we measuring our objectives for this next fiscal year? For the comprehensive plan, for example, something one of our members said that was involved with writing the RFP is that we want to have community members reporting that the steering group or the steering committee, that someone on that group represents them. That's a metric. We also want the consultants to be able to report what changed because of the public feedback. Those are kind of qualitative metrics, but we think important ones. The Brookline Housing Authority, Walnut High project, what are the grants that are going to be matched to the federal funding and local funding that we're going to, help and move forward with, and helping with coordination with different departments so that there's few surprises and time delays with the Brookline Housing Authority in the end. They are very highly organized developer, and we are very lucky to have them in the town of Brookline. And then as far as the CPA grant outcomes, we will be looking at how the current cycle funding combines with climate risk vulnerability or environmental justice areas as one example of looking at those metrics, and we'll develop more with the community. And then Toxteth Perry, again, looking at the percentage of significant buildings that are not demolished. Perhaps there's a town meeting adjustment that happens in the fall or spring with zoning, that and the number of new units that could be added. This last slide, this is my 10th slide, some quick Q&A. You had asked about whether our services are being asked more and more. Yes, but they have been attenuated over the last couple of years because we've seen an earlier coordination of priorities between individual members, ideas coming to us early on, as well as a much better coordination with other staff, select board and boards and commissions. And so that has helped us move forward in a more efficient way. The big news in the numbers, if you popped open that part of the budget, is that the sustainability position is shifting to DPW, as you know, and that makes sense to all of us, especially as most departments across the town are kind of shifting to execution mode rather than planning and community engagement work. We will continue to strive for a higher level of service with the same FTEs, except for, of course, the sustainability moving over. We are continuing to look for efficiencies, such as looking at the types of cases that might only need planning board approval, for example, rather than planning board and ZBA approval. That could significantly help us with staff time. And you asked, within an unlimited budget, we would be able to move more projects simultaneously. That's a pretty straightforward answer. And that's the end of the presentation, and I'm glad to take questions.
Thank you. Like all the other presentations, this has been very informative and very helpful. I have a couple questions, if you don't mind. First, quick one. One of the earlier slides, you talked about demolition, reduced demolitions. Were those demolition delays or permanent cessation of demolition?
I would never say permanent because someone 5 years from now could come back.
But beyond the delay.
But they moved forward with a renovation or an addition project that did not, where there was a lift of the demolition stay because Preservation Commission was satisfied with the outcome.
Okay. The other thing, with respect to slide 11, it looks like, and tell me if I'm misreading this, a huge increase in the number of Black businesses that we've contracted with between the first year and the second year.
Oops, sorry. That is the danger of looking at one department. So
Okay.
we have a very, very small budget compared to the overall town budget. But I think, so this reflects literally 1 or 2 or 3 contracts swinging one way or the other. Very small money, printing for the most part, photography, very small. But I do think it's important for us to report it because it does keep it in the forefront of our mind, even though we don't have, we can't have any formal policies, but we are just aware that when we're asking for services, we want to be going broad, not just with who we last did something with.
And I assume the, what color is that? Purple? That's the only thing I can detect.
Yes.
And that's Asian American?
The one that you see there, the biggest block that's a single color
In
is
the
Black
middle.
American owned.
Right, the blue is Black American, and then the sort of.
Oh, yes,
ish-
in 2018, 2021, yes, that's Asian American
Okay.
owned. Yep.
Sorry, I can't detect that color.
Yeah.
I mean, there's words for it, right?
Lavender.
There are,
Lavender?
and it also looks different from my screen and the monitor. So yeah.
I think Mike.
Right, thank you. So that was very helpful. Slide 12 rather, the 4-way 3-dimensional. I love that slide. I think that was terrific. Took a little while to figure it out, but that's a really interesting way of presenting what you're doing and how it fits with. That's great. I do have a couple of questions. One is you referred to Beacon Street design, and I assume you mean building standards, not the design of the street itself. We've been through that already. That leads me to a question about the department's thinking about expansion of form-based design to replace building code Is that something that you would be looking for along Beacon Street as the next step? And what about other areas of town?
Yeah, so Beacon Street and Toxteth Street, the Toxteth Perry neighborhood are, kind of
Similar.
second and first in what we're going to be working on. The Beacon Street work, we are also spending time in a parallel effort, which has been in fits and starts before with past boards, making very clear what the design standards are for that National Register district. A lot of people think, oh, it's a National Register, we have lots of protection. It actually means we don't have any protection. National Register only means that we can delay a demolition. So we want to make sure we have those we're going to be working on those preservation standards before also talking about zoning changes with the community. And at the same time, the comprehensive plan is going to be moving forward. And so, we do want to hear from the community that that's something they want to move forward with, form-based design. But in these, kind of smaller areas like Toxteth Perry, we think there's a good example. In the 5 district, we feel comfortable repeating that idea.
Right, thank you. Can I continue, Bernard? Is that,
Sure.
get all these out of the way? Thanks. One of the things that comes up from time to time and comes up on the listserv and elsewhere is that we have permits, building permits that are and special permits that have conditions in them. And the enforcement of those conditions, there was one discussion about trees, for example, in Hancock Village, and there are other examples very often having to do with not the physical, not the building itself, but rather the things around the building, the landscaping and so forth. Is the enforcement of that primarily in the hands of the planning department, the building department? Where does that lie?
For the most part, landscaping plans, plants, shrubs, trees, when they're planted before they get their CO, Polly Selko, the Assistant Director of Regulatory Planning, will go on a site visit, look at what they're doing, and then, sign off on them getting a certificate of occupancy.
Right.
However, that is where our leverage ends. It is kind of a one-time
CO is
check.
is the gate.
That's the thing. 5 years from now, if half of the plantings die, we don't have a lot of leverage to, come back to, although in the extreme case, we could work with the building commissioner, but the landscaping piece is primarily our department.
Okay.
Good.
And one last thing, you mentioned avoiding demolition, and I wanted to compliment the planning staff and the zoning board, and the planning board for that matter, on preserving 92 Sewell.
Right.
That's under construction now. The building itself is going to be attached to a modern structure behind it. But there was a great deal of interest in the neighborhood of preserving that. No opposition to more density, but interest in preserving the building itself, and at a cooperative developer, and a lot of good help from planning staff. So
Yeah, and the drive to do that, was the community spoke, the planning board listened, but I have to especially thank the planning board in that case because they were willing to step out and say, we want you to go for a variance.
Yep.
We're wanting to support.
2 properties.
Yeah. And that took a lot of leadership from the
Yep.
planning board. And then the ZBA kind of caught that football, right? And said, okay, I see where the community is going, but we got to make sure this is legal.
Yeah.
We got to go through the test. We have to make the findings. And they were able to support that desire, which we can't always do, but
Right.
they did.
Okay, Paul? I
Thank
think you're
you.
next.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
It's okay. Did you want to go?
no, I'm.
Okay. First, thank you for your work on the MBTA Communities Act. I read the Attorney General's complaint against Milton, and
Oh, yeah.
it's so great that we didn't have that. So, thank you. This may be a little bit out of left field, but do you have any role as planning and community development with respect to the Washington Street redesign? Impacts.
Do I have any role?
Yeah, do you have is there a role for planning and community development? I mean, this has a major impact on commercial, residential services, seniors. I mean, I can't think of something that's going to impact more different types of, of constituent groups in Brookline than the redesign of Washington Street. Do you have any role in it?
So the answer is yes.
Okay, good.
The DPW commissioner has been in touch with our office, especially recently, as she's been in this role, to look at how to do outreach, kind of again, more deeply in creative ways. And we're glad to support them in that. And previously with the past transportation administrator, when that project was up and going through the transportation board, we were asked who would be good to sit on the review committee as a business from the business community. One thing that's really difficult for a lot of us to understand, and we have to be reminded ourselves, is that when we ask a business to sit on something like that, we cannot be expecting them to also be responsible for outreach to all the businesses
Right.
about that. That
They
doesn't.
have day jobs and night jobs, which
They
is
have day
running their little
jobs
businesses. Yeah.
And night jobs, that's right. And that's true within a user group. Like, if we have a committee where someone might be there kind of representing the senior center interest, we cannot put on that one person who's attending those meetings as being responsible for reporting back to all the seniors. We have to think more creatively about that.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that those conversations are happening, and I'm encouraged that you're involved. I think it's important because it's much bigger than the transportation board or the DPW. This is central to Brookline, and it impacts many, many people, and that's kind of what you do. So it's great that you're involved. And I would ask you to continue to stay involved closely. And then the next thing is, of course, the comprehensive plan. And I'm curious about the tension that's going to exist between the desire to plan and the desire to continue to execute on some things. And I'm wondering what's the right balance? Because there will be strong opinions, of course, from the comprehensive planning side to stop everything or slow it down. But we know that we can't stop everything. But there has to be some balance here. Would you agree with that? And I don't know
Yes.
exactly what it is.
No, I agree. And that's why I come to you all early and often and say, here's our list, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can reorder that however you'd like. For example, the Babcock Street redevelopment, that was something that town meeting passed a resolution and said, we want to see housing here. To me, that's checkbox community support. But if during the early conversations of the comp plan, you all say, we've been hearing we need to slow down on that particular idea, then we can adjust.
Right.
There's other things like the Brookline Housing Authority development on Walnut and High, where they're competing for state funds in this current funding cycle. And I would recommend, if you asked me, that we should move forward with
Of
that
course.
project. Yeah.
Of course, I would support that. So it's something that, we've been talking about some of this stuff recently, but it's going to require some care and feeding and nurturing for that tension that's going to develop. And of course, the board can provide the guidance as well. And then my last question is about preservation. I know there's been some recent changes, I think, in that department. I don't know, but I'm wondering, how are we doing with getting our policies and guidelines around preservation kind of updated to be a little bit more supportive of climate change and, those types of things that we've heard from those of us that have purchased historic homes. And you got to go put in single pane windows and things like that. Is that something we're working on?
Yes, I have 2 answers for that. One will be a little out there, but those policies happen a couple of ways. The Preservation Commission has recently and does have a draft in front of them of updating their LHD guidelines generally. However, the Preservation Commission has had a couple meetings on this, and they're not likely going to support moving away from the original historic single pane windows. So the other lever there is, if there are boards that are making policy recommendations that the town or the select board doesn't agree with, then over time you can think about who would be on those boards.
So that's where the authority, so let's say, but that's where the authority rests, is with the Preservation Commission. And if they're going to stick with single pane windows, you're saying you got to find some preservation commissioners that would be more supportive of. Okay, that's helpful.
That's right. And you know, that being in a local historic district is a big expense. It's also comes with a lot of value of those properties that are in a historic district. It is not fun when you are the homeowner that has to replace a gutter or has a window smashed and you didn't even know you were in a historic district. But that is part of being in a local historic district, and it is where the Preservation Commission has the most
Right.
leverage in decisions on how to.
And I have great respect for the work that the Preservation Commission does. And I'm in one of these homes. So,
Yeah.
but you answered my question.
Okay, John?
Hey, Kara.
Hello.
So I think you heard my question asked of Rashid, and can you just sort of take it from there? Or do you want me to repeat it?
No, that's great. I will kind of lump them into a couple of different categories as I think about them. There are a series of 6 or 7 40B projects, for example, that have pretty much stalled. They're not working on building permit drawings. We keep in touch with them once or twice or even more often a year, see where they're at, what are they planning. What we have heard with those group of people is that they are not moving forward because right now, because of the construction loan interest rates that have just ticked up and made projects not affordable. They are also not saying they plan on walking away and never doing it. We're not hearing that. We're hearing a delay. There are other development, the other big development that I can think of that is delayed is Waldo Durgan Garage. And even though we as staff have recommended that they not move from the planning board stage to the zoning board of appeals stage, and this is, I have to thank our past engineering director, Rob King, for this. We wanted to make sure that when the drawings went to the community and as it kind of goes through that final approval process, that the community understood all of the mitigation that needed to happen and what those neighborhood impacts would be. So I can't stand here and tell you what those are, but I can tell you it's a very big project in the middle of a very dense neighborhood where we know that there's been electrical supply constraints with even smaller development projects around there. Our previous engineering director anticipated that additional work would be needed. I can't remember if it was domestic water or stormwater, but for large lengths of main trunk lines in order to not only accommodate the development, but also to mitigate with newer state standards of infiltration and that kind of thing. So that is something that we could have said, oh, that's okay, we're going to move it on to the ZBA. But we agreed with the engineering director that we wanted to make sure that careful thought had been done of all the impacts so that nobody was surprised at the end. And also so that none of us were kind of stuck with, well, they started the building construction, but now, oops, they got to tear up Beacon Street again, you know?
Mhm.
So that's the big one that I was thinking that you were maybe thinking of. But we do stay in touch with Chestnut Hill Realty very often. I believe that they have their consultants working on those mitigation drawings, kind of in the background. They're just not in public meetings. I suspect that they are also distracted, making a big push to finish putting stone.
Mm-hmm. That's very persuasive. But I just want to bring out an aspect of this, and that is that when there is delayed construction, and you know, after there has been a shutdown of businesses on a given block to prepare for the construction, it really, this isn't news to anybody. It has such a deadening effect on, you know, the general economy of that particular commercial district. And I'm pretty sure I have heard of, read of occasions maybe in other municipalities, but not in Brookline, when that became itself an issue for there to be action taken to sort of push the developer into, you know, kind of put up or move on, because this is just killing us, you know. Is there any path towards making this happen sooner, and dealing with a stalled development that is turning into a kind of an economic problem for nearby businesses?
So I don't know that it's an economic problem for nearby businesses. What we're seeing in the town generally, and especially in Coolidge Corners, vacancy rates declining since COVID. We haven't, we do, one of our staff goes to all of the Coolidge Corner merchants meetings. We do know that visual impacts are extremely important, not only to the community that lives there and has to walk by there to get to the library. That's a reason for its own to make something happen there. But also the spillover effects. If someone sees a lot of construction fencing and they're just visiting in town, briefly, that has an impact on whether or not they want to stay and spend money or shop at different places. I think we are lucky in this case that that site is on the edge of the cool, it's not Brookline Booksmith. But I agree with you. I would love to see that development move forward. And if we got to a point where we thought it was moving beyond a nuisance and community, well-being of wanting something to actually happen there, we would definitely bring that up with the town administrator of how we might look at different leverage points.
I want to be clear. I don't mean by any means to pick on one developer or one development. And there is at least one major sort of a hole in the ground situation in Chestnut Hill that has just created, it's mystifying to people, what's keeping that from happening. Anyway, let's put that aside. The other thing I noticed is that in the metrics part of the of your budget in the budget book, there's mention of the expectation as to how many 40B projects will be dealt with in FY25, and I was shocked to see just one. And is that really the case? I mean,
that's our guess. These are estimates, but
yeah,
that's our guess.
Even though we are out of the safe harbor now, right? We're no longer in the safe harbor, are we?
It depends on which week between February and March. We will, literally today, we might be above 10%, but as of St. Patrick's Day, we will be below 10% again. So,
any connection to St. Patrick's?
No, I was preparing for tonight and I noticed, I can remember it that way.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you. Very, very helpful.
Thank you all.
Okay, let me make sure I'm reading the right agenda.
I'm curious, was that new format more efficient or not? No, I wasn't here last time, so
Format.
the 15-minute the presentation format was it?
Oh,
Yeah, well, I think in the past, departments have been fairly efficient in their presentations, but this gives them a little more guidance that
I found it really helpful.
yeah. Okay, let's see. Next, our Zoom meeting protocol. Continued discussion on public meeting protocols for Zoom usage and possible vote. And secondly, continued discussion and possible vote on the policy involving the recording of public meetings. Who's going to lead?
You want to, Mike, you pass it around?
Right. We, at the last meeting, Paul and I agreed that we would go to work on a little wordsmithing. And we came back to you with, with a draft that is in here somewhere, I'm sure.
I'm wondering if maybe Charlie can throw it up on the screen.
Right.
Does he have it? I guess is the
Find it.
question.
I can.
It's in the packet.
Mike sent it around. Did it make it into the packet?
Yes, it's
Okay, it's in the packet.
yep.
Yeah, it's in the latest edition.
So I can email it to you if that would be easier.
I have it, Charlie. I can throw it up here. Hold on one second.
Depends.
That is-
Be able to share.
And that's the remote amendment, a proposed amendment to remote participation policy, right?
Yep, I'm going to share my screen now.
I mean, Mike, we didn't really, I mean, this wasn't a significant change. There was a couple of.
No,
tweaks
it
from
was
what
a
you
little.
saw
tweak
last
and a little-
last week.
And some
Most
thinking
importantly is the
about-
date.
Yeah, some thinking about,
Yeah.
well, okay, what's practical here? I think you're right, Paul. The most significant thing is the date that what we said is the deadline of September 1st for switching over all public body meetings, but as soon as possible for anybody who's ready to go. I think the most important set of public meetings that occurs is around the budget and the warrant articles in the run-up to town meeting. And to the extent that the advisory, those are very often the best attended of those meetings tend to be advisory committee subcommittees because they're hearings. And those are already on the webinar platform.
Yep.
Sorry, on the meeting platform. So there's a great deal that's already going to be moving in that, or is already on the platform that we're looking towards. We did want to give time for staff to get comfortable with this, and for chairs of committees and boards to get comfortable with it, which is why the September 1st is in there.
Chairs, you know,
I just wanted to flag, I do think it's important, you know, when or in the initial version of this passed during COVID, and I think there was general consensus between the town and schools. I just do want to flag that in item 6, I don't think the select board has the authority to bind town meeting or schools to this policy. So I do want
Right.
to just say that,
Right.
you know, you can make the recommendation. I don't think you can order them to follow this.
Yeah, I knew that. I was pretty sure that we couldn't do that with town meeting because they're not subject to the open meeting laws.
Right.
As I understand it. The school department, I don't know, but certainly,
Is there a reason to take it out or can we leave it in?
I mean, you can leave it in. It's just, you know, we couldn't enforce it.
well, if we can't enforce it, we should take it out. I mean,
no, this is a recommendation that, you know, the school department has, school committee in particular has public meetings that,
and we should say that, you know, we recommend that the school department do this as opposed to.
require.
Well,
that
but also,
yeah.
Bernard, this was in the existing policy.
Yeah.
Schools were in the existing policy.
Right.
but
So we're
again-
not changing this.
Right. I do think it's just as a matter of,
It's courtesy.
well, not, I mean, it wasn't, I mean, in terms of the legislative history of this or the administrative history of this, I think this was, the original version of this was developed kind of cross-departmentally between the select board and the school committee. And these edits, I think, by virtue of, you know, just how they've developed, have not had the school committee's input as of yet. So I think if you were to say this applies to the school committee would probably, would be within their right to say, it's our, you know, we're a separate elected body and we have the authority to set our own policy. So,
And there are plenty of things where we're going to be at loggerheads with school committee, and this is not one that.
Sure. So I mean, I guess one possibility here is to keep 6. And then, you know, we could amend it to say, and it's, you know, the schools are encouraged to adopt a similar policy, or we could take them out.
Well, yeah,
Develop their own.
I think, you know, schools are encouraged is appropriate because we are encouraging them.
Well, there's an omnibus way of doing this, which is to, and would apply to both town meeting and schools and anything else for that matter, which is to say that bodies that are not within the jurisdiction of the select board are urged to follow the same policy.
mhm.
Okay,
Public.
sounds reasonable.
To the select boards.
So that would be the new number 6.
Yeah, he's modifying 6 now. Although you can't see it because it's.
I'm sorry, because Charlie, can you move
There we go
the
again.
closed caption one more time? Sorry.
There you
Or
go.
is it on there? Hold on, I can.
It's
move it.
actually big. That's actually big who controls those.
I'm sorry,
So
Eric.
Eric, I will ask you if you're listening to.
Could you
slide
move
those back.
the closed captions? Yeah, no worries. Thank you. I can also move this up a bit. There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
I think that works.
Yeah, I like that. Good. Editing on the fly is always fun, but that's a pretty straightforward one. And certainly I was thinking about town meeting. I hadn't thought about the school committee, but because it was in there before.
Right. Yeah, I think the other thing is it's kind of an accident of the pandemic too. It used to be the select board did have more authority over the school committee. And then as part of the pandemic emergency laws, some of that was actually taken away. So there's kind of an accident of history there too.
We
Uh,
lost authority. I didn't think we had any authority over the school.
It's-
Except to say you can't have any money.
Right. As the kids used to say, it's complicated.
They'll do say that. Or maybe the kids have grown up and it's
Yeah.
the adults saying it.
No.
And Chess, I think it would be helpful to, should we adopt this, to just work with staff about, rolling it out,
Yep.
starting with the boards and commissions and of course supported by staff. That might be a logical place to start. With
Well, yeah.
a
that is-
simple to follow, one-page training guide and then training.
One of the questions that someone asked me was whether, in fact, somebody on this board asked me whether it was possible for the chair of a public body using the meeting platform to boot somebody out who was being inappropriate. And the answer is yes. And in fact, as chair of the advisory committee, I did that a couple of times. So it's the meeting platform has the same capability to push someone who is inappropriate off the page.
Of course, the complexity is that what is inappropriate is.
Oh, well, that's true whether it's a webinar or anybody else.
People are gonna say some really horrible things and
Right.
have a right to say them.
Right.
And they can- and they can s-
additional training that
Right.
we're gonna have to provide people.
And they can say that in a webinar format, or they can say that in an open meeting.
There's no difference. There's no
There's no
increase in
difference.
risk.
I did just want to flag though, because WGBH did some reporting on this. There is, I want to be clear on this, that there is a concerted effort out there to attack localities. There's a, big, anti-Semitic white supremacist group out there, trying to just basically stir up trouble. And so we obviously need good training and good practices in place. And just to be clear that it's not, the purpose of these meetings is not to provide a forum for anyone, any views other than the views of the official body, except in as much as may be allowed by public comment on matters of the board's jurisdiction, the organization's jurisdiction. So that's the end of it.
That's actually a very good couple of sentences that should be in hands of every chair.
Right. And again, chairs don't have the authority. It's right. Chairs have the authority to do what, the advisory committee does, which doesn't allow public comment. They can boot them to the meeting room. They can boot them to the waiting room. They can
Right.
take away their ability to speak if they're being disruptive.
Yep.
But they can't lock them out of the meeting altogether.
So, an open meeting format, everyone can speak.
No, luckily there are ways to prevent that.
There's all kinds of controls that you can have.
There are
There's
better
certain set of
controls in place now. Yeah.
There's actually a form of the open meeting called Focus that Zoom has. That's actually very interesting in that it allows the host or co-host to identify who has a seat, almost like in a panel.
Mm.
And then everybody else can see who's participating in the meeting. So it's very much like an open meeting, but there's more controls. But I think that I think this is very doable. We're recommending September 1st. There's seems to be some adequate time. I'm sure there's going to be some boards and commissions that are going to talk about this, and they may come to us and say, we may want more time, or we want
Well, and
an exception, and it's built into the policy here, and we can consider that. I'm hoping that they would reach out and we can talk through it and see if we can help them through the issues that they're facing. And if not, the board can take up an exception if they feel they need it.
Where in the policy is it built in that a committee can ask? for
it's
that?
in the.
It's item 5 there.
In the bottom of that first, sorry, above the.
Yeah, sorry,
You have to scroll back.
I'll scroll up in a second.
There we go. Except when temporarily authorized by the select.
Oh,
board.
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so they can come to us and we can give them an exception.
It's also limited to those that elect to conduct their public hearings remotely. So I guess that goes to our next item, which is the policy involving the recording of public meetings.
But you actually raise a good point before we go into that. There's no requirement that a board or commission hold a hybrid meeting, right? They if they wanted to, they could choose to do it in person.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct?
Oh, yeah. And some boards are.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not required.
Yeah.
And that, and there may be a board that's how they decide to deal with. If they're under significant duress from outside groups, they may say, we're shifting to,
Or it's a small committee that doesn't really, you can operate on the basis of in-person meetings.
right, that's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Hmm.
So we make a motion to vote on this evening?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so as edited,
As edited.
Yep.
all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Mike Sandman,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Okay, next, the policy involving the recording of public meetings. This is a lot more complicated than I think many people realize. But you can lead that discussion too? Or is that John?
It is me. I'm a little bit in doubt as to whether there is a linked document. What I produced was a, brief memo that included, I was asked to provide the names of the
Right, and
boards and commissions that I thought perhaps this should apply to. Is that linked in the agenda?
it is, it's on page 422 of the full package.
422, okay. All right, good.
They're all looking at 414. All right.
Yeah. Well, this has been brought up before. I'll just sort of recap everything. We have been operating for a while now on an understanding, excuse me, that a certain number of our boards and commissions and committees are of such important status to the interests of the public in Brookline's governance and in their ability to sort of follow what is happening in Brookline, that it might be important to average members of the public. There's a certain number of bodies that we put on a list to require that whenever they have a meeting, assuming that it's a Zoom meeting, that the video of the Zoom meeting be kept and made available just the way you would make minutes available, just routinely made available for access by the public. And it was limited because we weren't sure how much of a burden this would be, and we wanted it to be tried out by a few boards and committees and commissions before we made it broader. I think the time has come to make it broader. I haven't heard any complaints about implications of this for boards, commissions, and committees that have been practicing it. Some boards, commissions, and committees are practicing it even though they weren't put under the policy. So I produced a list, given that we probably need to define in some way, shape, or form a limit to the numbers of boards, committees, and commissions that keep these videos, because eventually it becomes sort of an archive and a storage issue, and it becomes an issue in terms of the amount of staff time spent on this, answering public requests for the link, et cetera. It also is an issue for if we're going to archive them through BIG, it could be a budget issue, et cetera. So that list was produced. I'll be honest, I don't have it in front of me right now. I'm not sure we need to read the names of
It was
those.
a good list. I think we all saw that.
Yeah. So the idea would be, let's extend what was at one time an experiment, but let's make it a permanent policy and extend it to a set universe of boards, committees, and commissions that will then be under the policy that would require them to make their Zoom meeting recordings available to the public.
Okay, that raises a number of issues such as retention of these video recordings.
Yeah.
And, that raises the issue of what committees are important enough to require permanent retention.
Right.
And those that we can delete after, I don't know what the number of years is, but after a certain period of time.
Some of that I think might be governed. Well, I was led to believe that there would need to be a determination once this becomes the policy. There would need to be a determination as to whether the videos themselves then constituted public records that needed to be kept permanently in some cases. And absent that determination, I don't think we'll be ready to put this into practice, but I think it's an achievable determination, and then we can use that to guide us.
Okay, so that, so this, we'll vote on this at a later date, but that is an issue we need to address.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing, I think you brought this up, That's very important that a lot of people haven't thought about is um, retaining or keeping the videos does not excuse you from preparing and posting minutes
Right.
pursuant to the meeting law, and that does not, as you said. So, this has to be a part of the policy that we expect people to keep minutes and post them.
Yeah.
So,
A couple of things. One is, just a little while ago, we were saying that a public body doesn't necessarily need to have a
Recorded, yeah.
Zoom meeting. So, obviously, one doesn't record in-person meetings. Do we want to say that these committees should make the meetings available via Zoom?
well, that's
You mean
forcing.
Well, Zoom isn't necessarily isn't necessarily
Well,
hybrid.
if we're saying everyone has to use open meeting, can't really say that they.
Well, if they're using, we're saying what we just approved was if they're using the Zoom platform, they'd have to use an open meeting. But there are some boards and commissions that don't do hybrid meetings, or they don't do online meetings. They're doing them in person.
Yeah, that's just my point. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I do feel that that's an issue to be dealt with later, and it's sort of separable. It's an issue of whether we've come full circle now and in-person meetings are not as pure, under open meeting law as Zoom
Right,
meetings.
Well, in fact, technology has forced that on us.
Yeah.
Uh,
I can't imagine the day when we say, no, I'm sorry, all boards, committees, and commissions have to meet via Zoom or record their meetings if in person. But maybe that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that anybody be forced to record a meeting if it's in person. What I'm wondering is whether these particular committees, which are significant public bodies, all public bodies are significant, but some are more significant. Others, as
Mhm.
it says in Animal House. The question is whether we ought to require these particular bodies to have hybrid meetings.
Mhm.
I mean, your John's list.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And if we don't want to deal with that now, okay, but it's something that seems.
That's a capacity issue also, as you know. I mean,
Pardon?
that's a capacity issue in terms of rooms that are available, that would have the equipment for there to be.
Well, some of these, some of them might very well use an owl, and we've used that for.
Right.
ourselves. So.
Some of these meetings, I assume, Mike, are meeting only in Zoom, these boards and commissions.
Yeah,
They're only meeting
some
over Zoom.
cases
They're
they
not
are.
doing
Right,
hybrid,
right.
right?
So that's one thing. The other, okay, I'll leave that aside. I just wanted to raise it now that I've caused a stir. The other thing is that my understanding with regard to the MOU with BIG is that they will provide storage capacity,
Right.
otherwise known as YouTube.
Yeah.
So so storage is not an issue
Right.
unless we go really crazy. But
No, well, we would have to break YouTube, so I don't
Yeah.
think we'll do that.
So I guess what I would, one path forward is to only focus on those boards and commissions that we're saying you must post
Mm.
a recording
Hmm.
with your minutes.
Yep.
And wherever that means it goes, if it goes to BIG or somewhere else, and make that available to the public and maybe start focus there. And then optionally, if you do record it, and it sounds like BIG is the provider, but BIG would need to have a place to put it. They'd have to categorize it, right? So when you go to their site, everything's categorized by the board or commission, so you could get access to it. That's how you find them, I believe.
Is it BIG that would need to do that, or just the link to YouTube that they provide to us that is on the website, on the town's website? Along with the minutes.
Wherever the link is.
Where is, it has to be there
This needs to be
somewhere.
operationalized, but when you go to, if I go to a board or commission, or I go to BIG,
Yeah.
it's listed, the select board
Right.
meetings or the age-friendly cities, community
Right.
meetings. So on me, Vitolo TV, you can click and then you go to see where all those videos are. How would you do that for Dicker or some other,
Oh, we're doing it now. I mean,
where are they stored?
they're on, well, you go to this CDI, ICR webpage in the town's, on the town's website, and they have, now, as it happens, they haven't been keeping up, but they began just posting it as a whole list of, the Zoom recordings of their meetings, yeah. But I don't believe it has anything to do with, big,
They're stored here.
yeah, yeah.
So it's a question of our storage capacity.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
is it- Yeah.
But right now, it's a question of our storage capacity, but if you were to change that somewhat and say that we're gonna ask Big to store these, then that becomes less of a problem for us in terms of storage capacity. We could basically say, we could ask these organizations to basically put into their minutes, when they post their minutes, a link to the video, and then it would be at the top of the minutes.
And as I say, that could be stored
Anywhere.
in YouTube.
Right.
And it could be anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not on our.
Storage is pretty cheap. Yeah.
Right.
It goes.
And, yeah, okay. And
The concern there obviously is, record keeping. It's that it's not it's within you, it's on YouTube and it's not in our direct control. So
Yeah.
we just have to be clear. We have to have a very clear chain of custody with Big and make certain that we're, everything is stored appropriately.
So
Okay.
John, what's your vision for how to move forward with this? I mean,
My vision?
yeah, I mean,
Well, I think we should simply, I don't know if there's been a policy worded yet. There's been a discussion and there's been a list produced. I think at some future meeting, we should put forward a policy and a list, but maybe we wait until this latest policy on, how to conduct meetings falls into place. So that people aren't dealing with two things at once. And because I'm not all that worried about it, because so many of them already do it. I mean, I don't know if every member of the public would have the same response, but if I ask for a link to a video of a previous night's meeting, it's sent to me without any concern.
it just may not be posted.
It may not be posted, but, if they can send it to me, they can post it.
Jess, does a board have the ability to post their own minutes and video, or are they reliant on staff to do that?
They're relying on staff to do that.
Yeah. Is there any way
The
to
video
delegate?
is not minutes.
No, well, I know, I said or minutes. Is there any way to delegate that so that you empower each board and commission to almost have a secretary to just recording secretary
I
to
believe,
post-
and I'm not familiar with how this works in practice, but I do think under our current file system, there is a way to empower a chair to have limited access to the file system to upload certain things. But generally speaking, we try and limit who can post on our websites, right, to staff, just to ensure that there's clear control over anything that gets put on as a final copy.
there's and I forget the name of the system, but in a meeting, like our meeting tonight, there's the agenda.
Yep.
And then there's meeting minutes.
Right.
And does that depend, does staff have to do that? Or does Lisa on advisory have the power to be able to do that?
Lisa's an employee.
Yeah.
So sure she does. Yeah. But so she's a staff member, but that has been jealously guarded by IT to the best of my knowledge, that authority.
Well, again,
And understandably, honestly, I can understand their concerns about it.
and this is a thing where, remember, we're moving over to an entirely new platform. We're moving over to Civic Clerk, in a matter of
Right.
weeks. So as we start to kind of work.
Does that have a delegated?
That's the hope, is that it's a more robust system.
Okay.
Right now, the system that we're using, frankly, is on life support. So sooner we get off that system, the better.
And we're gonna be briefed on and maybe trained on if necessary, civic clerk.
Yes.
Okay. It is a big change.
So John, maybe do we, maybe table this for?
Yeah, I don't think we
For a
need to
while.
take any action tonight. No.
Yeah, let's hang on and see how the new system, there'll be teething
Panic,
issues with that.
How much
Let's
panic gets
Yeah,
generated?
yeah, and
wait
wait,
till all the teeth are out.
get Civic Clerk up and running and
Okay.
people used to that.
And John, you saw some of Kara's questions too. I
Yes,
think we should
yeah,
try and come up with answers to those.
yeah.
Well, I just want to say thanks, John, for bringing this up because it certainly is an important point of engagement and accessibility for the public to be able to see that video. I know I greatly depend on the videos.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that we didn't have a policy or a systemic way to make sure it's happening. So
We're still,
thanks for bringing it up.
we're still catching up with the impact of
Yep.
all those changes.
Okay, moving along. Housing production plan. Kara, again.
Here we go.
Again.
Good evening. And Charlie, I don't know if you can, if you're there, Judy Barrett should be here or joining us shortly if you see her in the participants.
I don't see Judy yet, but I will keep an eye out.
Great. Thank you. I know she was thinking we were going to be earlier and is on Zoom with 3 different communities, I think, tonight. So we will have her join us as soon as we can. So Judy Barrett is the consultant that led the work for the housing production plan. And now that we are in the hopefully final phase of this, I just want to take a minute to give thanks to her and all the work that her group did over the last couple of years on the housing production plan. To refresh your memory, we were in front of you last October, right when there was a whole bunch of things going on. And you all wisely suggested that we put it to the side and come back to it after taking a breath and looking at some additional comments and edits. And that is why we are here before you tonight. In your memo packets, there's a updated draft of the housing production plan, as well as a cover memo from the consultant and a cover memo from me. Big picture, one of the biggest edits that we made in the housing production plan relates to the quantitative goal. In the draft you saw last October, there was a quantitative goal that said that we should be at 10%, real deed restricted affordable units, period. And what we've done is develop that a little bit more, giving it a time constraint of, this calendar year and the next 9 calendar years. We think we can reasonably and with a stretch get to 9.2%. So putting some time constraints on that rather than assuming it's all going to happen in the next 5 years. Other edits from you all that were very important that we incorporated included kind of language edits throughout. For example, making clear how the housing production plan will feed into, in some ways, the comprehensive plan, and how we'll probably come back and update our housing production plan after the comprehensive plan is finished, taking that into account. They talk to each other. Other edits included adding an explicit strategy to revisit our inclusionary zoning policies. That's a new addition. And then language and tone edits, including things like making sure people understand that the housing crisis, as you saw in my presentation earlier tonight, is a regional one, both in supply and demand. Of course, that region includes the town of Brookline, but we don't want people to get the sense that anybody believes that if we only built more housing in Brookline, we would solve the housing crisis in Brookline. Finally, there was a couple questions, I believe, from Select Board Member Warren that he asked since our October meeting that were kind of, policy questions, ideas, and those are initially answered in the cover memo from Judy Barrett on the 3rd page of her memo. So these are things like, would it be legal to give priority designation for Section 8 voucher holders as part of our lottery system? What can we do to think differently about our local preference policy, which we've, updated now and again, but it might be time for us to look at that again. And then also tax incentive policies like Amherst and, forgetting the other community, Provincetown have filed home rule legislation to possibly look at basically a TIF district for affordable housing. And those are, I'm glad those questions were asked. Judy gave us kind of a way to point, and we will be bringing those ideas back to the Housing Advisory Board and get their thoughts and whether and how to pursue those ideas. Finally, hi Judy, thank you for joining us. Finally, there is a edit that happened over the weekend, and this is an interesting one. Sean Lynn Jones, shout out to him, thank you. He noticed that on map 1A, I think it is, which built on the same map that we used in the 2016 housing production plan, used our IT GIS system for all of the spaces that are open space and parks. The interesting thing about the Brookline Arts Center and the adjacent Monmouth Park is that the adjacent Monmouth Park we had in our database as an open space, Article 97 protected. The L-shaped parcel that's adjacent to that has the Art Center on it, town meeting about a decade ago also said that the land surrounding that building should be designated Article 97 and that the building itself should be used for public and community purposes. So we are adding that footnote to that very first map that's in the housing production plan to make clear that we're, taking that off as a quote suitable parcel for housing and putting a footnote of why, because it was identified again back in 2016 based on the data we gave the consultant. And so we just want to fix that now. And we also have let town council and IT know so that we can make sure that source data gets updated as well. And I'll just say Judy is here and she can answer any questions that you might have.
Like,
Yeah, I apologize, Kara. I was on, but I just haven't been promoted yet.
Thank you for being here.
There's one thing, I'm looking at the document, I'm looking at page 51. And there's towards the bottom of that page, at least on what I have, there's a discussion of zoning bylaw height restrictions, and elsewhere in that same page, there's discussion of floor of FAR and so forth. And I think there may need to be a little updating of that situation, of that recognizing the changes that were made in the M districts and Harvard Street. And
51, Mike?
page 51 of the plan, yeah. And I think I'm on.
I do recall language about that Harvard Street zoning. Let me just look here.
Yep.
With your permission, let me just, what I'd like to do is leave tonight with a,
Oh, just, you don't need to
vote
do that this
conditional on-
second, just
yeah,
take that, it's just a comment about.
Yeah.
Let's, as long as we're bringing this up to date, let's bring it up to, really bring it up to date.
yep.
And I may be reading an old version, but I don't think so. This is in the packet, so.
Yeah, I think we mentioned that Harvard Street piece in a different section. And
Okay.
I'm happy to cross-reference it there.
Yeah, just a footnote there would be good.
okay, Paul?
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to Kara because she spent quite a bit of time with me going through some concerns and some questions and some changes that I had suggested, and it was extremely helpful for me to have that opportunity to do it. And I think I'm encouraged by the document. I'm encouraged by the real 10%. Because I think that makes a difference. The reason why we keep falling below, up and down, we're porpoising, I guess is the term, for the safe harbor, is because a lot of our inventory is actually not really affordable housing, right?
Right.
We get credit for it, but it doesn't really help with affordability. So I think I was actually trying to make it 15%, but I was making it higher. And you convinced me that was really a bad idea. So thank you. I just want to say thank you. Good work. And I'm ready to give whatever the approval you need, because it seems like you might still have to make some tweaks.
Yeah, if I could ask for a vote that we make 2 more edits and have the town administrator sign off before we send it out. One being the map edit that I just footnote,
Yep.
and the second being the cross-reference that Mike just.
Right,
too.
there is a reference later on in the document to it. But I think I'd be perfectly happy to vote for approval, adoption, conditional on the making the changes that were discussed.
Yeah.
Just for our vast TV audience, remind us what the purpose of the housing production plan is. I mean, it has a significant purpose, and it may not be perfect in many of our minds, but getting it approved gives us some significant leverage in terms of 40Bs that come into our community.
Yeah, I'm going to turn that question to Judy, if that's okay with you
Sure.
to answer that. Judy, why do you do what you do? Oh, no.
So a housing production plan is a type of housing plan. And it has a regulatory basis. Its purpose is outlined in the Chapter 40B regulations. It is to help communities work toward and achieve and stay at the 10%. So if you make steady progress, as Brookline has certainly done before, then that housing plan positions you to request a breather, if you will, from the Board of Appeals having to issue more Chapter 40B comprehensive permits. And I believe that in my time of working with you over the past many years, I think Brookline has been eligible twice for a so-called safe harbor simply because of the amount of activity that had gone through the Board of Appeals. So it's to help towns get to and stay at 10%. That's the specific purpose of a housing production plan.
Okay, any other John?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to vote for this too, but I just did have a couple of questions. On page 65, there's a line graph that shows essentially the final part of this line graph is a somewhat of a spike up towards a goal, let's say at around 2035, of reaching 9.2%. Well, I'm sorry, it's 2033, 9.2% year-round Brookline housing units that are affordable over time, 9.2%. How many affordable housing units would have to be added to get to that goal if, let's say, and what is the assumption as to how many other non-affordable units will be adding at the same time? I'm asking for a couple of numbers to sort of put this in perspective.
Yeah, so that the page before it includes a table of how this was suggested. This goal was my doing as far as the pace that we could attain, stretch and attain to. So taking the number of affordable units that we have now, and then making the estimate that all of the 40B projects that are not yet completed are actually completed in this next, building cycle of 10 years. So that would bring on another 342 deed restricted units, and then estimating that we could probably add another 200 deed restricted units through, for example, the Walnut High concept, which is probably around 100 net new units. And then in addition to that, we would need to figure out another 100, which I think we can do through properties like the Babcock Street parking lot or getting Kent Street off the ground after the Transportation Board conversations happen. So looking at that and then also increasing the base based on those 40B projects, that's how we get to the 9.2. But this is an estimate to show you how I think we can possibly get there. The other piece of the goal in here is that even if we can't get to that 10% by, the next 10 years, we want to have have more language in place about which properties we think will be next, that we will eventually be able to get there. Who has site control? Do we have site control? The goal being that either we or our partner, like at the Housing Authority, has site control of how we're going to get to that 10% so that there's a real kind of path laid out to getting to that number.
And if you don't mind my pursuing this just a bit further, just to pin it down a bit. So as I read that table on page 64, we're talking about an addition of, let's call it 1,200 units of affordable year-round affordable units. And
540.
no, actually, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
read it wrong. Forgive me.
540.
Yeah. So 542 year-round affordable units. out of a total of around 1,200 additional housing units that will
Right.
be added.
Right.
Is that realistic, on one hand? On the other hand, is that anywhere near what, we've been told is the expectation, from other, from the MBTACA and from
It's not-
the MAPC, planning for Brookline?
I would say it's independent of that. So that the MBTA just requires that we have the zoning in place. They don't track housing production. There is a Metro Mayor's housing
Right.
task force in working with the Regional Planning Agency, MAPC. They are meeting a couple of times a year, including with Town Administrator Carey. And we are doing a look back of 3 or 5 years and comparing notes with other communities, who's added what, that kind of thing. So that's where that kind of regional input is coming from.
Yeah.
Is the housing task force. Whether this is feasible, I think that it is. I still think it's a stretch. We know other housing affordable deed restrictions will be falling off over the next decade. So, it's still a stretch, but I think it's a good goal that 994 units of 40B projects are ones that have been permitted.
Mhm.
So the question is the financing going to come together in the next 10 years to actually build them?
Yeah.
With the exception of that Heath and Sheaf, I counted that in
Yeah.
40B and that hasn't been, I don't know if that will be approved.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Of Kara or Judy?
No, just to say, this has been a long process and you've done a wonderful job.
And it's important for the public to know this isn't the first time we're seeing this. We've been at this for a while.
As I say, long time, yeah.
And I also want to extend our thanks to Judy Barrett, who works in probably 50% of the communities in the state at once at any given time. And she's been juggling a lot like us with MBTA Act. And I thank her for her perseverance and seeing us to the finish line.
Great. Okay, unless there are any other questions, I move approval of the housing production plan as will be edited with the review of Chaz and his approval. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Mike Sandin,
Aye.
Paul Warren,
Aye.
and Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, final item on the agenda. Correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
checking. Select board warrant articles. So there are two that I'm aware, well, actually one, right, yeah, another one that
Uh-oh.
is on our agenda too. And
Mhm.
that's the
Not
Pierce
tonight.
School. No,
Is
the
there-
Pierce School, Article 97, warrant article needs to be on tonight. Because we have to file it.
But
Well,
they met.
they can file it, but
They
we're
can
not going
file
to
it.
talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. They're going to file, right. They need to file it by tomorrow.
Okay, so we don't need to approve.
You
it.
don't need to approve that.
Yeah.
You will be able to express your approval of that.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. That's-
Jess, since he brought it up, I do
Yeah.
want to make just one investigative request.
Yeah.
In the article that I saw, they listed, I think the Park and Rec Commission, the Select Board, maybe schools. And it would be really great to find out where the authority actually lies for this type of approval. Like, is this the authority of the Select Board to do this, or does it take all three? Where does the authority lie to change the article? That's my point.
Got it.
I'm not articulating it well, but you know what I'm
I
saying.
know what you're saying. And I actually don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. So we will look into that. But Joe might.
Explain it to me.
I think the question is, come up with Joe.
Explain the question
Town
first.
Council. So I'm happy to answer your question. So all of the boards need some place in the process. It starts with the school committee because they're the department in the town that is seeking this change. But the land is under the care, custody, and control of the Park and Rec Commission. So they would also need to approve it. Because it's Article 97 and it's a park, it's protected by the Constitution, the state's constitutional. you need the Conservation Commission's approval too. You need all that before it goes to town meeting. So you also have AC weighing in and then town meeting. Once town meeting approves it, then it comes back to the select board before it has to go to the legislature. So it's a form of a home rule petition, but it's a home rule petition with additional layers of protection because it's parkland. So one, you need a recorded vote, as opposed to most home rule petitions could be passed in an informal session on a voice vote. You actually need a recorded vote, and the legislature needs to vote at least 2/3 of both chambers in favor of this.
So I guess my only, and this, we could do this later, but I'm questioning that Park and Rec and DPW has care, custody, and control of parkland. You know, I believe the select board has the authority over land use as the ultimate body, and I'm just not convinced that the DPW should have control. I'm thinking of the school parcel. I'm also thinking of Lars Anderson because that's going to come up as well. So I'm just not convinced that this is.
So what do you
So
suggest?
he's not saying we don't have control. He's
You just
saying
said it.
So
Share. No, it's shared. It's
No, no, no,
DPW,
no,
it's
no.
Park- Right?
No, what Joe just said, if I understood properly, was
Yeah,
that
yeah.
our role in this is we can submit it to the legislature should the home rule petition pass the select board. But ultimately, who decides whether a park can change its use? Is it the select board?
The legislature.
Or is it the select board to be able to request that, or is it the DPW? I'm concerned about this because it does have other implications, especially around Lars Anderson, because there's other stuff that's coming to us about Lars. And I question about where the responsibility lies.
But ultimately, it doesn't go to the legislature without the approval of the select board.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're the final
Wait,
stop.
Isn't there a distinction between a process?
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Isn't there a distinction between this situation where we're asking for Article 97 relief and what's going to go on Lars Anderson? We're not asking for 97 relief there. So I mean,
Well,
it's completely different.
Yet.
Could be a change of
Very-
use. I guess I'm asking, and this is where I'm just unsure of where the authority lies to be able to request the change of use. So if, for instance, we didn't want to allow the change of use, does that mean the select board doesn't put it forward and that's where the authority
That's where the
ultimately
authority
lies?
lies. That's as I understand
That's
it.
why I say we're the gate.
Is that correct, Jim?
So let me try to answer that in 3 ways. Okay, so this particular warrant
Okay.
article is only about Pierce Playground
Yeah.
and only a change in the use of the subsurface of that park, of that playground. Because if you were changing it from a playground to something else,
Let's call it affordable housing. What if we wanted to build affordable housing?
you would absolutely need permission of the legislature. And there, the executive agency Department of Affairs would probably require you to find mitigation land,
Mm.
because since the 90s, EEA has had a net loss policy on Article 97 land. So if we were to change the playground from park to something else, we would have to find 2.7 acres of parkland somewhere else in town.
Swap.
What we're asking EEA in this circumstance is not to require that, because the surface of the Pierce Playground is not going to change. The only thing that's permanently changing is the subsurface conditions, where now you have soil, after you'll have geothermal wells. Yeah.
Mary says an important point here, and I wouldn't interrupt if it weren't important. Are we discussing something that's not on our agenda?
No, what the agenda reads, you're discussing the potential select board submission of warrant articles. And the question was whether the select board should sponsor a warrant article that's now being considered by the school committee about Article 97 request regarding parkland.
So
And our-
Well,
it is with the ditch.
in that regard, it would be helpful if we had material on this. I mean, I
I guess you haven't seen it. Okay.
well, I've seen it because I looked at what the school committee did at 5 o'clock, but
Well, that's why I said I had a question.
there was
So
no preparation, as far as I know, for us to discuss this.
Well, we're not,
terms of-
we're not voting.
Right, the initial thought on this had been that there would not be, because there was no need for the select board to sponsor it, that it wouldn't be before you tonight.
Yeah.
The question was raised, and it's, but the topic on the agenda is review, discussion, and possible vote on potential warrant articles.
Yeah.
So you have broad discretion to discuss this because a question was brought up. It was just, we weren't,
Right.
we had thought that where we were on this was that because the school committee can sponsor it, the select board can take the position that you can review that as you would review any other warrant article, write a report, vote on it without needing to
Yeah.
put your name on it as a sponsor.
I'm sorry if the question threw you off, John, but
And we had.
No, no, it didn't throw me off. It's just, you know, this is, the procedure's a little bit odd. I mean, granted, there is that generic, you know, item on our agenda, but you know, anything else that we're discussing under that generic item, we knew we were going to discuss it. We got materials about it. You know, there were linked materials, you know, that went with the meeting.
Well, John,
If the
with all-
public
No,
is following this, you know, how would they even know what we're talking
with
about?
all due
John,
respect-
you're right that it's not really on our agenda,
Yeah.
but you know, this is just background information. And I think the important point that town council mentioned is that ultimately it's our responsibility to
Yeah,
send it to the legislature after everything else has been done.
Yeah.
And the chair,
Right, yeah.
and the chair did bring it up. So-
So,
Yeah, I know, I
so
know.
I wonder if
my
it's
fault.
appropriate at this point to move to adjourn.
No, we have to
We-
vote
we-
on.
we have some
John,
items
John,
that actually.
you do have one article in the packet.
All right, so I,
Fine.
well,
Yeah,
nice
you.
try, Mike.
okay.
This
Sorry.
is not a public hearing. Regina, did you have something to say?
Public comment, I waited for the public
Oh,
comment.
for at the end of the meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're not quite there yet, Regina.
Regina Frawley.
Well,
We're
we're
not
not there
We're not there
We're
yet.
Not there yet, sorry.
Yeah, we got this one
last
thing to discuss.
Sorry.
Okay, so this is something that I have brought to the attention of the select board. It has to do with our bylaw that governs the Commission for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. It's a rather lengthy bylaw. The proposal would affect only you know, a handful of words in the bylaw, specifically the words that reference the number of seats on the commission. And it would cross out the reference to shall consist of 15 residents and substitute shall consist of 9 residents. Because of that change, there is a change required at the end of the paragraph that begins. And at the end of that paragraph, there's a reference to a quorum of the commission shall consist of a majority of the voting members of the commission. The original language is with a minimum of 6, and because the commission would now be reduced to 9, the minimum would be reduced to 4. So the size of the commission is reduced from 15 to 9 if this passes. The minimum required for a quorum is reduced from 6 to 4 if this passes. Miriam, who's our member who is not here tonight, was more involved than any of us in questions of appointments to seats on the commission this year. And she worked very diligently to fill seats that were empty. But despite her best efforts and the efforts of, or at least the intent of others on the commission, the number of seats that are filled currently is at 10. We never did get to 15, which is the total number of seats. It's the select board's responsibility to appoint persons to these seats. It's also the select board's responsibility to appoint a chair. And I think we have quite a significant degree of responsibility for seeing that this commission is able to function and is able to operate smoothly and to achieve goals. And I do think that the vacancies that have been chronic on the commission have become a problem in terms of the commission's ability to focus on goals. Now, when Miriam discussed this with the commission some weeks and months ago, she put this idea before them of a reduction in the number, excuse me, of seats on the commission. It did not meet with enough favor from the other members of the commission for her to pursue it. On the other hand, as often is the case, this was one of those meetings where, yes, there were certain number of people there, but far from what you would expect on a commission of 15 people. So it was a handful of people. I think they did achieve a quorum. They didn't take a vote. The whole matter was left kind of unresolved. And I think we as the select board should not leave it unresolved. And I've discussed this with the current chair of the commission, and Kevin and I are going to have a further discussion of it a week from now. Miriam wants a chance to share her thoughts on it when she gets back from Ethiopia. But we face a deadline. If we're going to do anything at this upcoming town meeting, we have to, for starters, sort of reserve a spot on the warrant for this possibility. I won't speak for Miriam. I think she was leaning quite significantly in favor of making this change. She did recommend it to the commission when she had a chance some months ago. I think she just wants a few reassurances before she gives her consent to it. But I think it's a good idea, and I hope the other members of the select board think it's a good idea.
Well,
all I
in
got
my
to say.
opinion, it's a great idea. I think
Good,
it's
good.
very, it's an important issue, and you've given a very good explanation of why.
John, I have
Important.
one question. Your conversations with Miriam, if she did want to tweak it, would it be within the scope of what you've proposed, or is it,
Depends on the tweak.
was the discussion
Depends
about,
on the tweak is right, yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Was it a question about how many? Uh,
That didn't come up. I think we're kind of stuck with it being an odd number because those work best, in terms of getting votes taken. So basically it's between going down to what would be the options from 15, 13, 11, or 9. But what I was working with was the existing number of filled seats, which is 10. And people are going to say, well, how do you get to 9 from 10? And what I have written in a memo to those of you here tonight is that that is doable as long as we just sort of bide our time and wait for. Inevitably, there is going to be some attrition among the 10 members on the commission. It's had quite a bit of coming and going, and I don't expect that to change. And so at such point, as it becomes 9, I think we can then proceed forward to keep it at 9.
well, and the warrant closes tomorrow, so.
Martin?
Yeah, yeah.
Mike, you have any comment? No?
I think it's appropriate to
Yeah.
reserve a space basically in the warrant by, accept-
Okay, I'd like to move approval of the warrant article with respect to the Diversity Commission. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac,
Aye.
Mike Salmon,
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you, John. That was very important.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, we're at the end of the meeting, and it's time for Regina to have her say.
I'm sorry, this is hard to hear and it
Yeah.
doesn't fit very well to do it this way, I guess. Regina Frawley, town meeting member, 16. I'm very disappointed in how some of the meeting was conducted tonight for a board that likes to think of itself as transparent. You hit 2 items in as you know, historically, I have been here for decades. And it went from before COVID, it went from department heads being here for every one of the articles that required money approval and explaining to you, because you ask questions like, why are we actually asking this amount? How are you going to use it? And what will happen if you don't do it? Or will it require even more money? You don't do that anymore. Then it was during COVID, okay, we'll do this in an omnibus fashion, but we'll name what the items were. And I got you to do that. Tonight, you just lumped it all together and the public has no idea what you voted. And you voted a lot of money tonight. And I'm disappointed in the members of the committee because you should have raised questions on items, at least 2 items that were well over $200,000 each. One has to do with ARPA, and we know there's a lot of controversy about whether the ARPA money is going to be awarded to the original people and under what circumstances. And that was 239,000 plus. And the other was 3H, which was the home funds. That's a regional kind of thing, and it looks like we're being asked to cooperate with Newton, and I would have liked some understanding. I would have asked you to ask those questions. How are we going to use those funds? Will we have to share it, any of it, as a regional thing with Newton? I'm not sure. That should have been discussed. Those are important items. There was no policy in my packet, so I would like the Zoom policy because I have an archive of every policy this board has ever approved for 25, almost 25 years. And I had it's not acceptable for you to just put a warrant article, item on the agenda that says discussion of some warrant articles and not tell us what they are, not have copies of it in the packet or online. We need to know what you people are making major decisions. It's coming
You have 30
across
seconds.
as very, very elite. And I think that you need to think about that and do a better job with the exposure here and the accountability of what you're going to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, there's one member of the public here and 4 online. No one is raising their hand or using the hand raised feature to indicate.
Okay, let me just say, with respect to the policies, I appreciate the fact that you're keeping an archive of all of our policies going back, did you say 25 years? Okay, so recently we began posting our policies on the Select Board's webpage. I urge you to go there and see if we've left out any policies, and if we have, to give us copies. Thank you. That's the end of the meeting, and we'll go home.